Okay, friends and fans, welcome to an interview with Micah Z'Dar. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood Arcade, Power Games, Into the Elsbound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire. Coming soon. I swear, I'm working on it. And I'd like to thank the patrons and those supporters who help make this channel possible. You can join them through the link tree. I really appreciate all the support you've given me so far and look forward to seeing you over at my Patreon. Today, as I said, I'm interviewing Micah Z'Dar, author of, let me get this right, it is, dang it, there it is, Forbidden Offerings. It's actually a horror story, and I'm not really into horror, but Micah, actually written other books as well. But so Micah, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Howdy, I'm Micah Z'Dar. I'm a indie science fiction, fantasy, and horror author. That's about it. Yeah, just trying to put stuff out there, have fun. Trying to express my creativity. It's a pseudonym. I picked it because Micah is sort of a rural name to me, and I'm from a rural area at the time. There's a lot of political stuff going on, so I figured why not. And then Z'Dar is actually, if you're a B movie buff, you've seen what is his name? Robert Z'Dar, the guy with the big chin and cheeks. And I just picked it because I was like, that guy inspired me a lot. He had this deformed face, actually. I think it's cherubism is what they call it. But he still went on to lead this badass life. So it was like, when it was time to pick a pseudonym, I figured, hey, that's a good, nice, clean, short surname.
Actually, I found out recently there's this children's author, and I was looking up their body of work. And in their early life, they actually started. As a scriptwriter in Hollywood, and I looked up the scripts they wrote, and actually long career of writing scripts. Remember all those sex comedies in the 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So one of Disney's top writers actually wrote sex movies back in the 90s. Sex comedies in the 90s.
Well, it's
So
yeah. I was gonna say Miramax is
yeah.
Disney, isn't it? And there was another
Yeah,
one too I found
Miramax
out about.
started as a porn studio, and it's owned by
Yep,
Disney. Yeah, yeah,
made all those crazy ultra-violent Tarantino flicks.
yeah. Disney actually used to own also Miramax, or was it Disney or Miramax? I forget which. They owned something called Pink Studios, and they sold it because of some of the taboo movies they were making.
Yeah.
Well, because they were using a loophole in the law, in that as long as uh, you know, as long as it was fictional, right? You could do anything as long as it was fictional. Remember that? Back in the 90s, you could make any movie you want as long as it was fictional. So if two people claimed to be have a certain relationship, it didn't matter it didn't matter like high school movies, right? Didn't matter that they were both 28, right? They could claim to be, look at Twilight. Twilight
Yep.
got away with it because the law hadn't changed before the movie was produced. So she's running around claiming, she's saying she's 17, she's in a relationship with a guy 101, but because it's fictional, it's not. They changed the law, as you know.
Hmm.
That's how Stephen King got away with it.
Oh yeah, that infamous the infamous
So,
orgy scene.
as long as it was evil, as long as doesn't matter how evil it was, as long as it was fictional, as
What
long as
was
the actors participating in, which is why in the movie it was never featured because they couldn't have actors pretending to be a certain age anymore,
Uh, it's like
right?
the old slasher flicks where they're all
Yeah,
high school kids, but they're in their 30s, really.
they were using the it's fictional, right? You can claim to be anything as long as you aren't under 18. But because its actors were under 18, they couldn't use the it's fictional rule.
They probably just didn't want to do that anyway, because you can get away with stuff in a book there that you
You
can't in
could
a
get more
movie.
away with more stuff in a book than you can in
Oh,
real life,
definitely,
yes.
definitely. There's books that, yeah, if it was a movie, I mean, there would be
Oh, absolutely.
arrests, even if they cut away, you know.
Look at Game of Thrones. They, what was it, 3 years in editing just to make sure they could get away with what they got with what Martin wrote.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I've
Martin
never
had a
read them.
lawyer. Yeah. Fire and Ice. Uh, they took a see because originally, I'm not a prude, and I'm of the I'm a libertarian, so I'm going to say I don't oppose what Jamie and Cersei did. Right? They're consenting adults, but because they had child murder, right? That's why, and all this other stuff. That's why it took so long. I mean, I'm not accusing Martin of using a ghostwriter, but I read somewhere that he was also a ghostwriter at some point, and also I read somewhere that this ghostwriter says poor people don't hire ghostwriters. you know,
If he
so
used
if
ghostwriters, he would have the other last book out. So.
no, but I'm saying I think they reached. I actually spoke to people about this, and the consensus mostly is that he's having a hissy fit.
Mm,
He wrote season 8, and when it bombed, he basically threw the baby out with the bathwater.
yeah, I have not. Again, I've not watched the show or read the books, but I saw a video where the guy he was making the case that the reason it was bad was because it was rushed. So maybe they just weren't
Yes,
aware of what made it bad.
yeah, but if you read the How to Fix Game of Thrones, right, you would go, yeah, wait a minute. If Jamie was, yeah, if you just change it so that Jamie goes back to Cersei because she was blackmailing him because he had abused her as a child, that would make sense. I'll tell everybody what you did, That, but that would require a younger actress. That would turn everybody against Jamie, and Jamie was only going to play the part if Cersei was older. This is why Game of Thrones took so long, because they just unraveled themselves over time. They used up most of their budget. This is what happened to Firefly. Firefly was given a budget by Fox, okay, and it used it up in the first 14 episodes. Actually, it used up twice as much. They used the entire 3-season budget in 14 episodes.
That's crazy. I see. Yeah, I know it's known as like the show that was everybody loved but got canceled in the first season. I've watched it. I really liked it. I'm not the biggest fan of space westerns literally being westerns like Cowboy Bebop does that, and I get
Mm.
people like it. That's fine, but I don't know. I never really it never really squeezed my trigger. But yeah, Firefly is really good. Is that the reason then? Just it was too much money.
Yeah, basically they broke the golden rule at Fox. You can do 1 million an episode as long as you build, as long as you're hitting, the high 50s, and he was only hitting 32 on the ratings
Uh,
scale.
well, and
So
again, it's one of those shows where they did the crap of misordering the episodes on them in a show where there's continuity. Maybe they're just because I guess for most of television, continuity has really not been a thing. So I guess they didn't. A lot of times when it was, they really didn't care. Like with the prisoner.
yeah, here's also the problem. and that people told me this is true. Fox despised science fiction at the time.
Really?
Yeah, they had people at Fox who were sabotaging the company from the inside.
I've noticed Fox shows love to break the fourth wall and insult Fox.
Yeah, because look, the a lot of people at Fox hated the management, particularly Roger Ailes, and they wanted to basically destroy Fox, thinking they could take it over.
Uh,
This is the problem. You look at California, man. They got all these wackadoodles who think the means of production, comrade, belongs to us, but they didn't create the company. They didn't create the IPs.
they didn't create nothing except for a lot
Yeah,
of the words that come in dang it,
yeah,
separation,
yeah. Because
alienation.
as of these actors are nothing without writers, and yet writers are the most looked down upon in the production process.
Oh, definitely.
And I see when I wanted to become a writer, I actually put it off for a long time. I actually started in actually originally I wanted to create my own role playing game originally, and I created a lot of stuff over the years. And then some asshole went and took everything. I mean, took my computer, took my stamps, took my anime figures, took my basically you name it. They took everything, including the clothes. I mean, they absolutely cleaned the place out. The entire
Oh my
truck
gosh.
came up. I was staying at somebody's place while they were on. Here's the irony: I was staying at somebody's place over the weekend because they went away, and they were worried about somebody stealing their computer because of a rash of thefts.
Oh my gosh. So so all that's that's why you have backup. I guess was that before you really had like clouds and things?
Uh, this was the this was the late 90s. So all I
Oh
had
yeah, yeah.
left, was going around to people's places and getting copies of discs again. And there was a lot of stuff I couldn't get copies of. I had actually no, it was 2006. I had to replace. I had a few weeks to go around. Replace my passport, my driver's license, bank cards, get on a flight to Vietnam. Married my then first ex-wife, and when I got back to Australia, the landlord kicked me out, blaming me for the theft. Which,
What?
yeah, I reckon it was his son. Somebody had a key and came in the back door.
Yeah. Man, I tell you what's that's probably it. When I was in the military, there was an incident where what it is, of course, you have the big barracks buildings, and the
Yeah,
whole company's in the building, and they have a
yeah,
thing called fire guard, where you have somebody there who's watching things at night, and they of course have a master key. And so they had
yeah.
a guy that got in trouble for stuff. He got in trouble for stealing, and they were going to kick
Mm,
him out of the military for like being a klepto, for like just stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. And so
yeah.
they put him on fire guard while they were doing the out processing stuff. And so of course he just went to everybody's room and with the master key and robbed them blind.
Yeah.
They just found all his stuff and everybody's stuff in his room, just sitting there.
Yeah.
That's probably what
Uh,
happened. Yeah.
yeah. And of course, so that put me back because I had this story originally, and I had this whole backstory, and it was it's basically a character. This is supposed to be about you, but
Yeah.
I had this character, and went by the nickname Bright Neon because every time he entered the outer planes, he glowed like a bright neon sign. He
Okay, that
couldn't.
explains one of your handles.
Yeah, yeah. Because every
Well,
time he projected into the astral, he grew like a bright neon. He stood out.
I wonder if you could just try again. Uh,
Well, that's what I
it
did.
sucked. Yeah,
Well, that's what I did, but I deviated. I deviated away from that. I actually did bring in that point. I have still haven't brought it up yet because I've deviated. Because since then I've grown as a writer, and so I've written
yeah,
more stuff, and I know all about taboos and Amazon. Speaking of, Amazon's recently changed their policy, so I'm having to redo my descriptions and put in a warning.
really.
Yeah, I think they're going to make it do it with horror too. That if you have any kind of gore, this warning, this may contain scenes of that may disturb some viewers.
Hey, it's like the warning label on a CD. What is
Yeah,
it? What's that warning? I can't think of anything right now.
it's explicit language.
That's it exactly. That's just an
Oh,
advertisement right there.
yeah, absolutely. I'll put. That's how I got into Black Sabbath. I had they went and banned in Australia the Black Sabbath album, so I went and got it before
Really?
it was going away. Yeah, and that's why. And I was getting back to the point. That's why they broke into my place, I think, because I had all this band,
Oh,
all these you cannot buys the original Black Sabbath Black album before, because when it was re-released, it was edited.
uh, why am I surprised Australia banned something?
Yeah, but here's the thing: if you actually listen to the song about, I think, Witch by the Sea, they're not praising her. They're telling you what a witch she is. They're telling you what a horror that when women are horrible, you can't fix them. She lives
Yeah,
alone by the sea. Leave her alone. She's not a good person. But I don't think they actually listen to the lyrics. I just think, and actually, I don't actually think in the original versions they swore either. I think it was actually later when they did the re-album that they added all the swear words.
I was gonna say I can't understand them anyways, but I guess Ozzy Osbourne is one of the few metal or hard rock you can understand, but you can't. The trade off is you can't understand him when he's talking, but you can understand him when he's singing.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things, and like the backstory to the album is better than the album, I think.
Yeah,
All the trouble they went through, all the censorship, and really they just wanted to be they didn't want to be known as satanic rockers. They wanted to be what's known as hard rockers.
yeah. That it was
They
original.
didn't.
Oh, I've heard him say something like he saw it more as a blues rock band than anything.
Yeah,
Which, of course, they're very tied at the hip, hard rock, blues rock, and early heavy metal.
yeah, but the thing is, they didn't mean to create heavy metal or death metal music. They just said,
Yeah,
the censorship got so bad that we might as well actually break the rules, because they never listened to the lyrics. And I actually think they're right. I think they just banned them because they needed attention, right?
yeah.
Now, if you know anything about American politics, you obviously know something about the moral majority. But
Oh,
the
yeah,
thing is, the
definitely.
group known as the moral majority weren't just Republicans; they were Democrat. They were mostly Democrats. This is where the Uni Party was born, and you had people like Joe Lieberman banning a game called Postal, which I play
Yep.
simply because I found out it was because it was recently unbanned here.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah, it
wild.
was banned here. Yeah, it was wild. I
That
found
was
out this
that was
20-year-old
gross.
game that I've been following on the internet for years is finally unbanned, and I'm like, woohoo! And then I'm playing it like walking around with a double barrel shotgun going boom, boom, boom,
Mhm.
and I'm thinking, I've done worse in Doom. Why is this game
Uh,
banned?
yeah, it's ridiculous. My politics. The thing I've gotten to is like, okay, you've got Hobbes and you've got Locke, and Hobbes says you gotta protect people from themselves, and Locke says nah, people are good on their own. They can watch out for themselves. That's not literally, of course, what they're saying. That's just a summary. But
You
I'm kind
mean
of in the middle where I'm like, I don't know if people can watch out for themselves, but I don't really trust leaders to do it either because they're going to do stupid stuff like that, and
yeah? The
they're not
problem
going
is
to
the
understand
tyranny.
context
Okay,
or anything. Hmm?
but we go back to Jefferson and the tyranny of the majority, and you look at South Africa. The tyranny of the majority exists there.
Oh
You
yeah,
look at Venezuela. The tyranny of the majority exists there. So you go back to the original decision, and you go back to Andrew Jackson, who basically was of the opinion that rights had to be selective. Otherwise, you have the tyranny of the majority, right?
that's true. You can't
If you
have.
didn't limit rights to the individual, you have the tyranny of the majority. Hey, Eastland. Yeah, Eastland follows me on Facebook too, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, you have the tyranny of the majority. And from a writing perspective, I think that's where we get our best conflicts.
Really,
It's the tyranny of the majority or the entitlement, right? You look
it's
at
not.
Darth Vader.
Yeah,
What's his beef? He believes he's entitled to his never ending story, right? He basically didn't want to lose his wife. Why? He was paranoid about death. They portrayed his backstory very poorly. Okay. I remember the original backstory because I played the LucasArts games back in the day. I had the LucasArts collection. There were 75 Star Wars discs, okay?
dang. I was a Tie Fighter kid, Star Wars Tie Fighter. That was my jam.
Yeah. Oh, there were like 6 discs, I think, in that one. We had
Probably, I think the one we had was it might have been two. I don't remember, but yeah,
no, this was discs. The original
CDs.
minis. Yeah, before
Oh,
CDs. We didn't have a lot of. I didn't have a CD player for years. They were like $699, man. I blew $299 on a hard drive.
we were talking about music earlier. I have a big collection of music CDs. I don't have anything to play them on. My laptop doesn't have a CD drive.
Yeah, my laptop doesn't. My laptop has an external,
I've
but
I've got the
all
whole
my
bolt
music is
thrower.
digital. All
I've
my
got the whole.
music is digital now.
Yeah, I just use YouTube. I've got the whole bolt
Yeah.
thrower discography on CD, and I'm listening to it on YouTube right now while writing. Perfect for
Yeah.
dark fantasy or any war stuff.
Yeah. And I mean that's where you get your best horror, I think, is the is the is the mob. Okay? Because there's nothing more terrifying than the mob of like OIQ people, right?
That
Emotions of the mob is brutality. Right? It's the banality of evil. There is no motive to care about. They're just
that is
emotional wrecks.
that is something that I've noticed as well, where you'll have these situations where somebody will be surrounded by a mob, surrounded by protesters, rioters, or whatever, who are getting
Yeah.
kind of violent, and they maybe run some people over, clip some people trying to get out of there in their car or something, and people will act like it's just this incomprehensible thing. Why would they do that? Well,
Charlottesville.
they
They
don't
they
understand it.
they didn't
Yeah, they
show the context to Charlottesville. They didn't show the context to anything. That's what they do. They clip art. Back in
oh definitely.
university.
That's
They,
part
they,
of
yeah.
that's why that's the entire. I was gonna say these people don't realize the mob mentality can kick in because they're not educated. They think they're educated, but they're really not. They don't know about
They're
the psychology of
indoctrinated.
a
They're
mob and
selective.
stuff.
Yeah.
But the protests in the road, I believe those are specifically calculated to get people killed to create, again these clips to have people
Yeah.
become
Tomatoes.
martyrs
Yeah.
to create outrage. Because even if people are completely compliant, they don't have any road rage, and they stop and wait, even if you had that, which of course you're not, but even if you did, why are you told as a kid to stay out of the road because you're going to get hit? There's going to be accidents. It's just a fact of life. So that's intentionally done by the higher level neo Marxists because they of course don't
Yeah.
care about the lower level people. That's the real danger is these university guys in their ivory
Yeah.
towers getting kind of political,
and
but I mean it's the
and
truth.
they dare call us sheep. I had people on the internet explode at me. I just say to them, "Cry harder," and they say, "I've got nothing to cry about." And I say, well, if you didn't have anything to cry about, you wouldn't. You would have just scrolled past. And yes, Estlin, it is the beast of the lower mind. Okay, you've got the lizard mind, right? You've got the monkey mind. Monkey see, yeah, okay, you've got the lizard mind, the emotional. I just sit there on I want to be warm and comfortable. Okay, that's the lizard brain, right? And you got the monkey brain, monkey see, monkey do, right? Then we get into the slightly higher mind, okay, the sub-rational, okay, the instinctual, right? The instinctual and sub-rational mind of the lion, okay, and then you've got the higher primate.
Yeah, I
And
don't know.
because the higher primate's the minority, this is why it's the theory of the majority. When the lizard, the monkey brain, and the the irrational predator, the wolf. Okay, so you got the lizard, the monkey, and the wolf always ganging up on the primate.
I just know that yeah, oh yeah, there's definitely psychological things. There's you could
But see,
probably
here's the thing
bring
that people don't understand about conspiracies, particularly neo-Marxism. The higher ups don't tell the motive. They don't. They just wind up. They're just wind up dolls. They Orwell told us they use slogans. Okay, they wind people up with slogans. The
yes.
patriarchy,
Well, and the thing about
tax the
conspiracies
rich. Yeah.
is we obviously conspiracies exist. That's a legal charge you could bring somebody up on. That's what they
Yes.
use to break apart the mafia. And all a conspiracy theory is somebody's looking at something and saying, I smell something fishy. The
I
people that are
recognize
above
the
me
pattern.
do what now? No, noticing patterns.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
the,
noticing patterns.
the
That
people
particular people. Yes.
criticizing the people that are in power and questioning their motives, it seems like it makes sense to me. I don't know. This is like self-defense. I don't understand how people can be against it. It just seems so natural that yeah, you would
It
look at
is
your
natural.
leader. Exactly. You look at your leader and say they might be up to no good. They've got all this power over me, this wealth. They might be. There's been unlimited corruption among the ruling class for all of history. Why wouldn't it
Yeah.
still be going on? Now, that being said, of course, you can get into the wacky conspiracy theories. There's different levels of it because, you know, I might look at 9/11 and say, I don't think that it's holograms or whatever, or maybe I don't really think that it's thermite or anything, but they definitely took advantage of it. That at the very least, right?
Yeah.
That would be a conspiracy,
Here's
or
the
they
thing.
let it happen. That's a sane conspiracy.
Here's the thing. A sane conspiracy is looking at 9/11 and saying, right, we can see the cover up, we can see a lie in that we saw the video live, but the video we heard the jet, not saw the jet. Then we heard the boom, but we didn't see the jet. And when they're clearing away the rubble, there was no jet.
They didn't find any parts. Well, again, there's definitely shenanigans because I don't think they found no passport of that guy. That was clearly an op, and it could very well be that they
The
didn't know it
person
was
who
going to
found it,
happen, and they
yeah,
scrambled to make this up because
yeah,
they
the
saw
person
the
who found it
opportunity.
didn't plant it. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
Yeah,
Operation Able Danger and Operation Red Flag, which I know a lot about, exposed serious flaws in Western security. Okay, CIA would create a red team. Okay, red team was to go out and find flaws. They arrested red team for terrorism because they found flaws.
really. I knew about there were red teams. I thought that was a fairly standard thing. Have a red team go. Hell, I knew a guy who did some soft core version of that where he was looking for
Yeah,
security flaws for a while, and he said all he ever got to do was he waited for somebody to scanned the badge to get into a building and sort of jumped in after him, and almost immediately somebody was like, "Hey, where's your badge?" And he said, "Okay, I'm red team or whatever. You got me. Good job."
Yeah, and I went so far as to I went for a security job, and they give you the standard questions, and I said, name a security flaw, and I said people. you know, how did this is what people don't get. How did Macedonia beat Persia? They bought two of the three generals. How did people? This is the thing that people don't get.
People
Okay,
are people. People are
that's right.
people and have always been people, and that's something people never really key
There are
into.
things, yeah, there are things in society we do not like. We have to accept that there are people who are going to do things that we don't like. What we have to do is set a boundary. And the problem is we set the boundary high so that we can create blackmail, not so that we can protect people.
Yeah.
When I was going through in university this security training, this is what they were telling us, okay? That certain things are illegal, not because they're wrong, but because they need blackmail material.
That or just on paper excuses to get people.
Yeah,
You can't get them for speaking out, but you can get them for that busted tail light or whatever.
yeah, that's it's. I'm talking about mundane, everyday mistakes you can make in bookkeeping, uh, like they did with Trump.
Yeah.
You can write legal fees, but if the law says no, we want further explanation, and the lawyer does, Cohen, being the lawyer, okay, who hated his ex client, turns around and says he provided me with no explanation, which was a lie, but it didn't matter in court because the lawyer has legal immunity. Why is that? So they could bust the client. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about creating flaws in the system, but flaws they can use against you, not that you can use against them.
Well, I referenced The Prisoner earlier. I just got done
Yes,
watching that show, and yeah, he gets all. That's what back in the late '60s that he's getting into surveillance
yes,
state stuff. It's like he knew it. How did he know it was coming? Was maybe
because
he
he built
talking to
the system.
people?
Yeah,
Because I know he
he
was a
did.
spy on a show before that. Maybe he was talking to some other
He
real
was
spies.
playing an older character of an earlier spy he played, but it was not a
Yeah,
continuity of the story. It was two separate
yeah.
stories. But the prisoner was basically he made a mistake. They couldn't live with the only way to appease the opposition was to either kill him or retire him. So they retired him to the island so that he couldn't talk. But in case they needed him, you know, hey Mike, remember this job? Who was that? They his
Well,
head
and
was too full of secrets that they needed to reference. Okay, it's
well,
like a
and
library.
yeah. Well, and it serves the other function because one of the number twos literally tells him, says, "This is a model for how we're eventually going to run the world. This is a test bed for a total control
Yes,
paradise system."
yeah. And by the way, this is the thing about the Matrix. If you think about it, right? First we start. First we start in an office building, in a cubicle. Then we have work at home. Then we have virtual reality. Then we have total immersion. You are now the prisoner.
Yep. And people will go into that's the thing. One of the things that really gets me. You want to talk about sci-fi and predicting the
Yeah,
future is
predict their future. Yeah.
once you get nerve tie-in virtual reality where if you go in and you have sex or whatever and you can feel it like it's real, that ends civilization. I kind of I fear because there's so many
That's the
people that are just going
problem.
to get caught in it.
This is the problem people don't understand about neo-Marxism and conspiracies. It's the top is the only one who knows the motives. They only have to filter down.
I
And
gotta,
see, people don't understand. The people at the top, there's no left or right. They have
yeah.
all four sides of the pyramid, and they just
I see. I kind of agree with you, but I kind of don't because I think what it is it's a complex system, and you got people, yeah, who are in control who want that total control.
yeah, and
People
they
like
don't
these
care which
tech
way.
oligarchs.
They
Yeah, those
yeah,
people
they
don't.
don't care which way, but it's leaning left because the left are more fanatical, right?
Well,
You look at
because
the
they infiltrated everything. I think the neo-Marxists that is
yeah,
that's a separate thing, but it's keyed into it because they know they can use them.
yeah,
And then, of course, on top of that, you've got politicians that are just there for the money, for that K Street money. Or I'm
because
sure
they're weak.
Australia has the
Yeah,
equivalent.
yeah, we all have them. Yeah, we all. Every nation has the same politician, a cookie cutter from university, who is indoctrinated to be corrupt.
Oh, definitely, and that's people say that with the people that are conservative are like, oh, why are all the conservative politicians so wimpy? It's like they're not. They just don't care. They're not there to institute conservative laws,
They're
whether
not
you agree with that or not.
conservatives.
They're there to make money.
I met I met all right. I met a conservative, and he was telling me that most of the if he had his way, he'd have a TV show where he just interviews, just shows you the true lives of all these so-called conservatives, but they'd never win an election again, and that's the problem is that they're not
Yep,
who they say they are, and
and it's so
nobody has
ridiculous.
right now. We don't have an answer to how we can have a political structure, and I think this goes back to the founders when they said the answer is no parties.
See, yeah, no parties, and I think I think politicians should be very well compensated. But the other side of that coin is if you get caught any kind of bribes, you're
You
done,
lose
like
no, yeah,
execution. Yeah, like imprisonment or execution, and there's no K Street, there's no lobbying, none of that. There's none of
yeah,
those kickbacks. If you get caught doing any under the table, there's no above table because it would be totally illegal. But in any under the table, you would be done, son. That's the
yeah.
way it needs to be.
I think the price of being a politician is subject to constant scrutiny and open and transparency
Definitely.
about every account, everything you own. I believe in the. This is something I instituted in my stories. A lot of stuff I have in the stories. Corruption's legal in my empire.
Yep.
You pay taxes on the bribe, but it's also on public record.
Yeah,
So
you went in
take
some
your risk.
interesting directions. It's
But
not
remember, the
quite like anything
Inquisition.
I've ever read.
Yeah,
I'm
an
sorry.
Inquisition can sit you down and question you, and if it's against the public interest, you lose your status as a noble, and you can't be a ruler if you don't have the status of nobility. The nobility is a club. It's not an entitlement. There's only a few entitled people who founded the empire. They're the only ones entitled because the empire literally belongs to the Hashimoto clan. It's their property,
So that's
right?
the thing
They
about
lease. Yeah,
these neo aristocratic people or whatever you want to call them. Where I'm like,
yeah.
I get that you're rejecting the current way of doing things and all the neo. And again, that's the other thing is people don't know what a neo Marxist is. They think woke. They think SJW. They don't
Again, they
understand
think
the
it's
actual
free
problem.
healthcare
Yeah,
because
people
remember
on either
they've
side they
been
don't.
indoctrinated.
Oh,
They
and
don't
I seen
think.
it.
They don't analyze what they. No, I've seen
Yeah,
neo-Marxism. I was at university, so I've
me
seen it.
too.
I've seen
Oh,
people who believe the party's always right, who think that Marxism is just about free healthcare because they naively go in believing that that is all. Well, believe people. These people, remember, they recruit kids, and these kids never mature.
it's yeah, and get them young. That's what all the evil groups do. Get them young when they have energy, and then you got them their whole life as well. And I've seen that. I've seen guys when I went to university, and I'm of course in Texas. I went to, quite frankly, I don't want to cuss, but I went to a a cow pie kicker university. Let's just say. And I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't know if you can cuss on here, but I went to a
After 10
university.
minutes, you can cuss.
Oh, okay. A shit kicker university, kind of. A
Yeah,
little bit prestigious. A little bit. It's for training teachers. A lot of it. But I had
yeah,
seen people go there to this university on bull riding scholarships. Literally, that's how rural
yeah.
this is. And they come out of it just completely woke, complete neo Marxist. I've been in situations where I was at university where the teacher would say something where again the class is mostly just neo-Marxist, and I have to take it because I have to take all these other classes, and
Well, that's what they do.
every
They
head
funnel.
turns toward me when she
Yeah,
makes a point and says, "You got any objections?" Every head in unison, like a old horror movie, like a '70s horror movie, is absolutely like, "What is going on?"
yeah. And what you don't realize is that university, half the people there have never left. This is why half the campus is permanently there.
Yep. People going to school for years and years to become teachers to just regurgitate what they learned, and it's
Yeah,
never
10 years
applied to
to become
anything
a
actually.
teacher. Yeah, it's bullshit.
Or
And
and the
yeah,
teachers again are evangelicals for this neo-Marxist stuff, but I get hung up on that, and I scare people talking about it because I was witness to it. But there's so many other problems because again, there's all the corruption. You've got the counterculture that's going against this that is scared of it, and I very muchly sympathize with that, of course. But they go a little
mm,
bit into weird directions I don't agree with, and get a little bit too I don't know obsessed with certain weird psychosexual stuff.
yeah, it is. And I've been there. I've seen it myself. Where you'll have this girl who she's a Marxist and she's sleeping with everybody but you, and that's weird. And
That's
she's
the
always leaning on you, and she's and it's just you can smell it all the time, no matter how much perfume. And
yeah.
I don't understand it. Like I sort of understand that they're told not to sleep with you. They're just they you, but I don't understand why they would just go around sleeping with all these men that they don't like, and then just to prove that they're party loyalty, and then and they're trying to get you to like them as a friend, and it's like it's just a weird thing they do. This indoctrination they have where nothing they do is logical but emotional. Where they size people up and they want to put you in a box, and it's totally sick.
It's it is this giant, it is the long march through the institutions, and they did it while everybody was distracted by other crap, and they got in everywhere. They got into schools where they can get you from kindergarten on through the university. They're just indoctrinating you one way or another, entertainment, all of
Yeah.
it. And it's
See,
not
the
even a
thing is that
conspiracy because it's open. Do what?
the thing is, until the 1920s, none of this was happening. It happened in the 1920s because you had a weak politician who basically just gave into organized crime. Roosevelt, Wilson, and Roosevelt and Truman, they sold out,
Well, they were
and we have,
terrible. Yeah.
and they brought in all these foreigners who were basically Marxists who have been expelled from other countries. Once upon a time, if you're a Marxist, you got kicked out. You got sent the.
Yep.
Oh, you want to be a Marxist? Yeah, go be a Marxist in a Marxist country.
That and it's not they let it infiltrate that way. They let it over time again do the long march through the
Yeah,
institutions. You got the universities for decades and decades now have been neo-Marxist training grounds, but there was never any talk about defunding them, even when you had Republicans in there, until they started criticizing Israel.
yeah, and that's the problem. The Republicans are controlled opposition, which is why the problem is trying to reach people because the neo-Marxists control the communications. They
That's
control what
Yep.
we. You look at me. I've how many submissions? I don't know how many submissions you did, but I was either too clean or too rude. It was never. You know,
Talking about the agents.
yeah.
Yeah, Agent. I've queried 2 books. I'm gonna query the next one I'm making just to see. I think I'm in a little bit better position now to do it. But yeah, I queried these books, and it was an eye opener because yeah, it is just a wall of white women, and I know I don't like to get into that necessarily, but yeah, it's kind of like
Oh, they're hot. Yeah, yeah.
and
That's the
then
conspiracy. All you have to do for a conspiracy is find a commonality with a large enough group and stroke their ego, whether
and they
it's
all
Marxism or
yeah
Islam. Look at
all
Marxists. Marx actually. This is the thing. I knew for a long time about the relationship between Marx and Islam because I didn't just read Karl Marx. I knew them all. Okay, Karl had a daughter, and then she had a daughter, and I knew from people that uh, Marxism has been run by women since the 50s, actually since the 1850s.
there's certainly a lot of it in there, and then you go on these websites, you go to query, and every one of them has a land statement where they acknowledge they've stolen the land, but they won't give it back. Uh, and then all of
Yeah,
them
Ben and
have like
Jerry's London inland. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's like, well, give the land back. And then you've got all of them say they prefer gay authors, and it's like, should I just pretend to be gay?
well, that's
Like,
no. They actually no. You don't do that because they'll send somebody around.
well, since so really,
Yeah, I've been rejected. Actually, they actually wanted me to make my main character gay, and then
really,
yeah, and then they says, "Oh, by the way, they would prefer if they had that if I uh, met socially with a gay activist as an agent." This was
what?
Penguin, okay? Yeah,
Wow,
Penguin wouldn't publish my book unless I went out with one of their gay activists in
what?
Sydney. This
And
is like this is how
your book has a lot of queer characters and stuff. Where the elves again start out with the dick inside of them and everything, with the internal dick, and there's like Nori and everything. Like how it doesn't make any sense even. It's already like that.
here's the thing. Yeah, Nori's fruit Nari, okay, but he hasn't
Or
developed a penis, and he's caught between am I male or female? But because he's just not at the right age and the right mentality, he's met because he's mentally unstable. They say no, you got to stay as the gender your guardians picked. You can't have surgery because it's life altering. It's permanent. Okay, it's
yeah,
genetic reassignment. It's not. See, this is the thing. They have the technology to edit your genes. If you want to become a woman, they can do that. Okay, here's a machine called the
yeah.
rebuilder. You
Well, and
know,
when you get into that, that's all compliance. That's all about getting you to say some insane stuff that a man can be a woman, and that's again
yeah,
completely separate from people who have that mental
yeah,
illness. And I very muchly sympathize that with that because if I had, if you read
but
Orion Crucible, one of the characters has
yes,
body dysmorphia. I
yeah.
very muchly sympathize with that, but I think that he treatment, not mental health treatment, and
That's what
compassion
they're
and
doing.
stuff, and
That's
not
what they
mutilation.
said with Nori, that you first need treatment and because
Yeah.
this isn't, and what they wanted me to do is to turn Nori and Cade into gay lovers
Absolutely
and cut all the
ridiculous.
other characters out and change the whole. See, once they get going, they change the whole story. They actually wanted me to take out the fact they had the ability to edit genes and make somebody a woman. No, no, no. It has to be cosmetic surgery.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's somewhat.
They wanted
Uh,
to actually lower the technology level.
to that's
And instead of having 120 plus planets, they have 125 nations on one planet, on this one big giant.
what?
They
Those
wanted
are
it to. No, and they weren't spacefarers. They just magically went to the plates. And
very weird. I don't know. And this was Penguin. Yeah, they're making weird decisions here.
Yeah, I had this guy for like 3 hours going through story edit changes.
Yeah, I'm. That's. I mean, and that speaks well of you to reject that, because that, I mean, a Penguin publishing thing is like an author's dream come true, but
Yeah, the thing is, they were only offering 300,000. They were offering 300,000, but paid $10,000 a year. And of course,
oh my
that
gosh.
here's the problem: if I get 10 grand, I lose that from my pension, so I'm making no money because it's also under the tax-free threshold. So I lose. So I get paid 10,000, but I lose 10,000 off a pension,
And that'll
and
be
I've
over
had to
30
bastardize
years.
my story, and I get
Right.
no royalties because they're just buying the book.
Really?
Yeah,
That's really weird, man. It's really, really weird. Uh,
they
we
wouldn't
haven't.
allow any.
Hmm?
See, they said basically, I said to them, "What happened to artistic integrity?" They said we can't take that commercial risk. Really? Look how many books bomb. How many? Look how many publishing houses Penguins bought from in the last 10 years alone because of one book bombing.
Well, I mean, I feel like the formula for books is they're basically the prototype for movies and television and video games,
Yeah.
and because pretty much anything like that's going to be based on a book. So that's kind of
See,
what you're doing.
yeah,
So it's like
but
you're gonna get that money back. You're gonna sell it to people in airports and whatnot, and then you'll on Kindle, and then sell the rights to some studio. Once you get that good one, so it's like a numbers game, I would think.
it is a numbers game, okay? Because particularly Penn and Random House have such a huge catalog of successful books, and obviously they're sitting on, the royalties they pay out are not spectacular either, you know, but they're not the same for everybody. Every deal seems to be based on some people get, like J.K. Rowling, they get the royal treatment, you know, whereas um, she got artistic integrity. She got the most money in the world. She got absolute. She got translated to for a book that's set for 4 years, and I guess because there was nothing else like it, it got Plus, she being a woman, she got $1 billion worth of advertising for free.
Yep.
Whereas you and I, I've heard horror stories from a number of people telling me, oh, they don't want to discuss on air the bad offers they got because at first they seem good, but then you realise that when you're talking about 10,000 sales at $3 a book, that's 30 grand. And sure, so sure, getting offered 300,000 would be fantastic, but they're only making you're only making there's you have to wait for them to make 300,000 on top of, and then they'll say, oh yes, but we also incurred these expenses, and you suddenly realize that until they make 3 million, you're not going to see any money because they
That
just
doesn't
keep
surprise
adding
me.
it. Because they keep adding it. Because when you're looking at royalties and advances, you're also looking at the interest and the expenses and the advertising. And you have to pay your own expenses on some of these book tours.
Really?
Oh yeah,
So
they're
you're
nickel and diming. Yeah, they're
so you're telling me like Penguin is basically a vanity publisher? That's at least the way they're treating people, and then
yeah.
just taking the money and running.
You look at Bloomsbury. Bloomsbury. You inquired Bloomsbury? They don't. Yeah, they basically ask. They're worse. They're only offering 10,000, and you have to make your money in the first edition, or it gets uh, put on their website. Doesn't go into bookstores. It's
Hmm.
like Barnes and Noble, basically, on a micro scale. You might as well publish with Barnes. You might as well publish with Barnes and Noble if you're going to cut yourself off like that.
Dang. See. I think you gotta kind of go through an a, or definitely have to go through an agent. But again, you gotta get
But
an
that's
agent.
again, yeah, you got
Hmm?
to get an agent. You query agents, and they want to change everything to mass market appeal. That's the only
That
thing
don't
they care
surprise
about
me.
is mass market.
Yep. And yeah, it's a giant mess, like so many other things. That's what it feels like. Everything in the world has become a damn giant mess somehow.
The thing is, I asked somebody, how did 50 Shades of Grey get published? Oh, that's because we know her.
You gotta don't. It's not what you know. It's who you know.
Yeah. Plus your
Yep.
gender, plus your politics.
Well, and it's
Yeah,
sex
well,
appeal too.
Ruth was not only was she got a special. Ruth has multiple privileges of being, you know, a double minority or whatever. Special double privilege class. So she gets, plus she's from at the BBC. So and it's the same thing. Oh, J.K. Rowling. Oh yeah, she was personal friends with Stephen Fry. So
Oh,
boom, she got
really?
it in with the BBC. So again, it's these
That
things don't
explains a
happen
lot of
by
it
accident.
then. Oh yeah, if she was friends with him, then yeah, that explains. I mean, it is a good series. I enjoyed it. It must have some appeal. I don't believe these things are just accidental, but that it definitely would have not been as big a thing if she hadn't had that connection.
No, but here's the connection that most people don't get. Okay, 13 cases of plagiarism, all hit with, oh, you've got to put up a $1 million bond to fight this case. There are absolutely clear references somewhere still, are basically laid out. And this is again where people out there who want to become a writer, when you first realize you want to become a writer, I don't know if this happened to you, but it happened to me, is that you meet the dark side of the industry.
See, I
And it's not about art, it's about money.
yeah, that's the thing is it's always going to be the creative people kind of clashing with the people they need, which is the people that are just there for the money. The studios that or whatever, the publishing houses. And so it is art versus that drive to get money.
Yeah, and the problem with the audience is that I do believe it's the audience. You look at June. You look at a lot of the early sci-fi writers. They weren't celebrated when they were alive. They weren't. Their books did not. Look at Tolkien. Okay, if Tolkien hadn't been a professor at Oxford, his book still would have been sitting on the shelf of Oxford Press, would have never been widely published.
Somebody's weed eating outside your window. It sounds like,
Yeah,
or a drone or
city
something.
living.
Nah.
City living. There's always somebody mowing the lawn or somebody.
Man, where I am, it's like eerily quiet. It'll be like creepy sometimes, but then there'll be a sudden burst of really, really loud noise, and it's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Well, that's what they're doing. Most of the time they're not doing it, but I guess the weekend's over, so which is weird. It's Monday morning here, and you got people doing weekend stuff because they slept through the weekend.
Yeah. It's not that bad. It's just funny. A lot of
Yeah.
times, yeah, I'll be watching a YouTube video and somebody will be like, "Oh, I don't know if you guys can hear that," and I won't hear nothing. But that might be because I don't wear. I just use the laptop speaker.
Yeah.
I've got headphones right now. I don't even know if I could hear it if I didn't have headphones.
Uh, I get like June is actually for people who don't know June. If you've read the entire series,
I have.
Frank Herbert is laying out the global conspiracy of power, what it is, and how they do it, and how they get away with it.
Yeah, Dune was one of my early. Dune and Lord of the Rings was one of my early things I kind of fell in love with reading.
I can't. A lot of women would be very upset if they knew actually what a fish eater was.
Oh yeah, yeah. He definitely got into some interesting
He
sexual and
was
gender stuff
very
later.
yeah. They'd be screaming they'd be screaming misogyny if they actually understood what a cut fish is and what a fish eater is.
Oh my gosh. Well, and yeah, the honored matrons, whatever it was, where they're basically
Yes.
dominatrixes. And then the
Yeah,
Bene
exactly.
Gesserit again are the Jesuits. He was getting beaten up by the nuns, and so it was kind of him either just like
Getting his
rebelling
yeah.
against that or processing it, you know.
Yeah. But he was actually basically then he says who's behind it all, and the Jesuits were hiding them and but never goes into why they were hiding them, obviously. And X, absolutely, X is the conspiracy of all conspiracies.
People doing what they're not supposed to behind. Do what I
Closed
say,
doors,
not
yeah.
what I do.
Yeah, exactly. But isn't that always, I mean, in forbidden offerings, you're basically going on about the how people are lured into the forbidden, you know,
Yep.
and people don't understand how. Uh, I think I don't understand why people don't understand what evil is because evil is just an absolute that you can actually recognize instantly if you critically think. You just have to ask yourself, would you like it done to me? No. Thank you, not no, thank you. I'm not gonna eat shit. you know?
That's the thing. Every civilization has their own variation of the golden rule. You know, do unto others as you would have done unto you, or some it's worded different or whatever, but it's always
Yeah,
basically the same idea. And that's kind of my worldview. Is I hold people to the standards that I think are reasonable, and like it's like, is that a reasonable thing to ask of somebody? Yes, no, okay, that's how I'm gonna treat them.
yeah, yeah. You see again, what we have is a society run by people who run around saying, what if? Oh, what, but what if? Oh, this person, what if she's drunk? We you know, once upon a time you could just go out, meet a person, and if they could, and then you take them home. You had sex, and if they stuck around, you eventually got married. But the problem is, they started wanting more and more and more, and then wanting rules to protect them from responsibility. And they turned into baby killers. They turned into shrieking shrews. And if you go back to death metal and the early 70s when they're saying, let's just let her live by the sea, she's a witch,
That
and
keying into
it's just so metal. Metal is actually very meta on society.
yeah. Keying into the whole battle of the sexes thing was such a brilliant move on their part because it's so universal.
And
Because
now they're using it, and now they're using race. They're adding race and gender. It's race and gender versus the white male.
well, and I tell you, the thing that nobody wants to hear this, and that's the problem is, so the neo-Marxist, of course. I mean, you're smart, you're educated, you know about that. I know the person commenting has mentioned it, so they understand what the real problem is. It's not Tumblr Marx. It's not a fat woman on Tumblr. This is like a
She's
civilization
the
ending.
victim. Yeah,
Yeah, in a way, yes, because she's been brainwashed by it. So it's like,
she's been brainwashed to end her own family because we so-called historically did all these crimes. Well, I'm sorry, but the world committed all these atrocities.
it's
We,
yeah,
however,
history is just
won
blood.
civilization. We won and put an end to these crimes, yet somehow we've been punished for it.
Oh, exactly. Where the British Navy did so much work ending slavery, but the British people are demonized. But as I was gonna
Yeah,
say, I was gonna say, here's what people don't want to know. Here is this neo-Marxist stuff. They will pick Because what it is when they have the women and the minority, the racial
Yes.
stuff, the transgender, the gay, that that is replacements for the proletariat that Marx predicted would take over the very hyper oppressed factory workers, because that didn't come to pass. They had all these
Yeah.
reforms that got rid of that stuff, and then technology advanced and all, so that doesn't exist anymore. They had to find a new proletariat. They're going to do it again. They're going to switch again. This is not permanent. They will end up
Yeah,
throwing
it's a
away like
permanent
the gays and
revolution.
all.
No, the only thing permanent about the revolution is the revolution. You look at China when they run out of when the oppressors, when they ran out of store owners to oppress because they realized, oh
The
shit, we need them.
the black what is it? The black red and black people or whatever they labeled
Yeah,
them
yeah.
when they run into the black label people. Yeah, they just invent more. So they're going to switch it. They're going to find somebody else, and it might very well be
It'll be
the
Asians. It'll
Chuds.
be black versus Asians. It'll
It could
be
very that's a possibility. Yes, because I mean, and it
look at
again
California.
that
Look at
yeah you
California.
and you could make a joke about Asian people all you want. You can make fun of them all day, but you can't make fun of black people or whatever. That's so yeah, they might key into that. They might go for Asian people. They might go for rural people like me. They might uh, again, you got all these guys that are having difficulties with women. They might reverse the curse on that, and they'll of course redo all their aesthetics and things, and you won't know it's them, but it'll be them.
But here's the thing: in China right now, the revolution is against women. They've basically declared women in China to be gold diggers and
Really?
unworthy. Yeah, there's over 100 million single women now in China.
See, I thought it was mainly single men because of the one child policy, and they would just kill
No, men are the
most of the
minority.
female babies.
Here's the problem:
Really?
because what happened was men die young.
That too, yeah.
The women outlived them. So society's becoming going from 50-50 to 60 to the 70, and the people between 50 and 70 are majority women, and the majority of them are single, never married.
Hmm. See, I thought it was the
Women over
opposite.
30, no, because no, most of the people who died during COVID were men.
So, okay, are you going with the theory that COVID was way more devastating over there than they admit?
That's what China. That's yeah. I'm going with the theory that
Okay, because see, I know they have terrible air problems there, so and that makes you very
yeah.
vulnerable to it. And I got COVID twice, and I could see if you had some respiratory problems and were in a bad state that it could definitely get pretty dangerous. I thought about going to the hospital the
No,
first time I got it.
but according to Jeffrey Sachs, who's not an idiot and he's not a conspiracy theorist, he believes that between 10 and 20 million Chinese men predominantly died because they didn't shut down the factories. They let them run.
They couldn't afford or didn't want to,
They
too
couldn't,
greedy.
yeah, yeah, they were just too greedy. And also, you add to the fact that what they don't count in China is the high suicide rate,
That too, where
particularly amongst men in their 50s.
they were bolting or welding people into their apartments and stuff.
Yeah. And he
Weld
also
somebody into
says
their
that,
apartment, they're not going to survive.
yeah, and he also says that China's got the lowest birth rate in the world. So
And
how could they still? So they might have peaked at 1.4 billion 20 years ago, but there's no way they can sustain that population if their
especially yeah,
population growth is less than 2%.
especially with all their issues with food production and stuff. And again,
Yeah,
it's a man. They've somehow managed to find the worst aspects of communism and capitalism and adopt both of them. How do you manage that? You know,
but basically because them are not good people, and good people cannot create; they can only destroy.
yeah, that's going back to your Tolkien.
Yeah. See, as I said, you look at my society, it's a highly managed society, okay? The elves are highly managed.
I thought you were talking about Australia.
Yeah. Okay,
That
in
too.
Australia, it's just wackadoo. Okay,
It is, yeah.
wackadoo.
It worries
But
me.
basically, communism is founded solely on the principle of envy. Okay, you go back to Marx. He was a high school student who was indoctrinated and probably abused by Friedrichs into the collective. Okay, before it was called socialism or communism, it was called the collective. Okay,
Yeah.
Bolshevik, and he was basically indoctrinated to be the and groomed to be their next prophet. Okay, this is what they do. Every generation, you look at Marxism, you look at before Marxism. Every generation they create these prophets. Okay, and they write a book. Now the thing is, Marx realized that you can't give it away for free. And originally, I forget what Das Kapital was originally called, but Das Kapital
It was
just
like
seemed
the
to resonate with people as a title. But most of them don't get through half the book. It's just like this thick. Most people
yeah.
can't read it. And
No,
so
it's
they basically read the 14 points on the first page, and that's about it.
yeah. I know there's a lot of drama with him in that community. But if you've ever listened to James Lindsay, he goes through all the communist neo-Marxist texts, and yeah, they're all word salad. They're specifically designed to just be read by a few people that understand that language, and everybody else it
Yeah,
might as well be a spell book, you know.
yeah. But the problem is that he sold people on envy, that you, as a worker, are entitled to own the means of production. Basically, because you use the tools, you own the tools. But however, no state has ever done that. So therefore, no state is pure communism. The problem is every time they try, what happens? You're just gonna the factory shut down because here's the thing: you have to have a profit. If the company doesn't make a profit, where are these tools going to magically appear from? You just go to the tool store and take them. Soviet Union tried that. You heard about the day with no money, haven't you? The movie, The Day with No Money.
No, but I mean, I get what you're talking about. They're all
The
run by
Russians made a
people.
film called The Day About Without Money. It's a counter revolutionary film, but it basically points out the flaws of communism. And what happened is the Russians tried to go without money, and it didn't even last a day because people just took everything, and
Oh,
then
of
nobody had,
course,
and it was just so disorganized. And
communism would work if people weren't people.
yeah, so
Exactly.
this is the problem. This is what Marxism thinks, that we're indoctrinated to be greedy. But the problem is Marxism is based on greed and envy. You know?
I think back in the day, it probably had some appeal because again, those factory workers were just in the worst situation.
Yeah, but why
But
does it
that was
appeal?
fixed, you know.
Yeah, but it
That was
appeals to women because of boundless greed. Okay, women by their very nature are consumers. They basically um, you hear about some of these, they want to. Oh, I made a TikTok video. Why aren't I being paid? I, TikTok makes all this money. Where's my share? I made a TikTok video. Yeah, so did a million other people. They see this is a problem. They don't understand that $1 million shared a million ways is here's your 1 cent, here's your
yeah,
dollar, here's your 1 cent. Why is it not a dollar? Because of taxes and expenses. And modern women, by their nature, have been indoctrinated into wearing makeup, into always needing new clothes, to never wear the same clothes twice. Uh, some women, they can't have a bath. They've got to rinse themselves with perfume. It's getting to the point where all the Western humanity is being catered to by feminism because it's taken over Marxism.
see, I
If you
I
actually
thought it was
read
more
Marx, he
gay.
was against Marxism was against the women having votes. Marxism was against women having jobs.
I'm sure they were against gays, and I know he said stuff about Jews as well. So it's like
Yeah, he said his hatred should be particularly direct. Yeah, Marxism. I forget the exact quote, but he said something about hatred had to be specifically. Uh, his eye was specifically reserved for Jews. That he didn't even hate the capitalists, but he hated the Jews especially uh, because their
he said
betrayal.
some.
They're
He
supposed
said
to
some
be
very yeah.
because they're supposed to be God, right? They're supposed to be God's people, yet they enact all the worst of capitalism. He didn't say Jews invented capitalism. He says they adopted capitalism.
Well, and he said some pretty unflattering things about Africans too. So it's like this
Oh
is not.
yeah,
If you're
yes, he's
ideologically pure, yeah, maybe that's not the best Messiah or whatever. That the best.
that's right. As Eastwood says, need. Women have needs, but unfortunately, because women's needs can be never met, it's boundless, right? You will
Well,
always run out
that's
of food. So when you know what I mean, from women's perspective, your food only lasts a day. You always need new resources. You always need more, right? So it becomes this indoctrination of to the point where women are catering to their emotional needs, and because emotional needs can never be met, they're replacing those emotional needs with pets, with eating, with clothing, with makeup, with jewelry. Okay, son. Thanks for coming. But I'm just saying, from a writing perspective, when you research Marxism from a writing perspective, it is no different from any other form of imperialism.
yeah. It's it's a infiltration ideology.
Yeah, it
It
works
is,
as
yeah.
very good. See, Marxism works as an opposition ideology, just
Oh,
like
very
Islam
well.
works as a barracks mentality. It, they're all designed for specific needs of Pacific empires at the time. The
Exactly.
the how do you describe the anti-monarchy group? Right, the nationalists who wanted to get and the nationalists and the Masons wanted to get rid of monarchies because they thought businesses should rule. Right, they wanted to create a plutocracy. You saw that with Robespierre. So they created this new socialism. It was actually called New Socialism. It wasn't originally called communism. Marx created Marxism because it's cult of personality. But the collective, as which it originally came from, was renamed to New Socialism. You can actually find a there's the Spectator, there's New Socialism, the New Worker. They're all brands, 67 onwards, right? They're always rebranding. They're always trying to find that new
That's my
num
point.
num num.
Yeah.
Yeah, this new
Is
high point.
if the battle of the sexes thing and the whole queer thing taking advantage of that phenomenon, that group,
Yeah,
and the whole race thing, when that falls through, they'll move on to
yeah.
something else. They'll
When you
find
run
something
out of
else.
an enemy, and your ideology is based on having an enemy, whether it be Islam
Yep,
or Satanism or communism, you all your ideologies, all your isms require an enemy.
that's true.
In China, the enemy is the anti-revolutionary, but because they can no longer define the anti-revolutionary, it's very hard. See, when your entire ideology is based on I'm a hammer and anything that opposes me has to be nailed down. What happens when you run out of nails?
Yep,
You
that's
start pulling
true.
them up. You start pulling them up. You start creating them. See,
That's true.
and what happens is they have to pick the winner. When you're the winner in a race war, which happened, called the Crusades, they pick you as the enemy.
You never run out of
So,
enemies.
the, yeah, the
You can just go on
majority
forever.
Yeah, they have to do. That's why they talk about destroying the white majority, but that's a myth.
And if you look at 1984, which was of course written by a guy who was a socialist who was a part of these groups and
Yes, he
understood
was.
them. Exactly. He was in there and he understood them, and he I think he was in there because he thought it was the right thing to do legitimately, but he understood what the corrupt elements, their mentality, and so that's when he
Writing that
made
in,
them
yeah,
where
he
they
wrote
do that. They use it as a
he
control system.
yes, he thought that if people understood that Marxism was Marxism and National Socialism were all bad, that only his socialism, only him and his democratic socialism, the voice of the people, would
A
be
well-meaning idiot, but yeah.
yes, he's a
At least in
well-meaning
that, as
idiot.
far as that goes. I mean, he's brilliant for making that allegory, that thing where that
What do you mean?
it's
He all he did was tell us what he was just told us about the inner workings of the party from the perspective of a BBC presenter who was an
well
insider.
it presents
It was a
things in
handbook.
such a way. it How do I want to word this? It just lays it out so clearly and gives you just all
Yes.
these perfect words, because that's one of the best things fiction can do, is give you a word for something. Like the Terminator movies give you the word Skynet. So now if you're worried about this, you don't have to sit there and explain. You just say, I'm worried it's going to become Skynet. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He did that, but with
Yeah.
dozens of words. uh, you know
That's
double
the
speak, all these
brilliance.
things.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was
Now,
more thinking though of he's you have the whatever the main bad guy's name is. I don't remember, but he
yeah.
talks about how he can control reality with
Yes.
people and things.
Because people are uh, I actually think Orwell, he was a propagandist for the British Ministry of Propaganda. That's where he got his indoctrination and education through Oxford in the 1940s. For and I think actually he was given time off to write his book because they thought he was going to write more anti-Nazi propaganda for them,
Hmm.
and that's why they were so reluctant to publish his book. But because they'd already signed a deal, it was you know oopsies, we'll give you a print run and then that's it.
Hmm. That's the other thing, man. Is you got all these different ideologies, but you also have intel agencies that do a lot of stuff behind the
Yeah,
shady stuff behind the scenes. They
behind the scenes. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah, he was
have
an
their
intel
fingers
operative.
deep
Yeah.
into Hollywood and entertainment. Yeah, they have a
Here's the thing: how many authors turned out to be spies?
yep,
Ian Fleming.
yep.
Uh, Tolkien was a radio operator. Although in World War One he was actually a runner, wasn't he? In World War One he was a runner, I think,
Yeah, I'm not
because he
sure. I
could
don't.
read and write. I think he was a runner. He could read and write.
I mean, maybe you're thinking of Hitler.
No, no, Hitler was a runner too. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I don't think Tolkien spent much time on the front line. I think
I
after
wasn't
six,
as. Yeah, I'm not sure if he did it all. I'm not too knowledgeable on it.
I know he was on the front line. People are going to say he was a soldier. Yes, but he wasn't a soldier for long. I'm not sure if he was a runner or a typist.
Yeah, I'm thinking if he could type, they would have him doing clerical stuff.
Yeah, I think
That's what
he
I would
became the
think.
company cleric. I don't think he was originally because he was sent later to Oxford. He wasn't from Oxford. He was from Oxford, but not an Oxford guy.
Yeah,
He became Professor Tolkien. He didn't start as Professor Tolkien.
that is. Well, I would think he would be of a higher. Well, I don't know. It's weird because I would think you need to be from a little bit of a not maybe not noble family, but a well-off family to get into Oxford, and then I would
Yeah,
think they
but
would not put you
surviving
on the
World War
lines.
One, surviving World War One with a what was it called then? A minor commission. He wasn't a sergeant, was he? He was a
A
corporal, wasn't
non-commissioned
he?
officer. A non-commissioned officer is the
Yeah,
term. Yeah,
yeah,
it's odd, like the Navy's petty officer, which I always thought sounded kind of insulting.
yeah,
But yeah, military ranks are a whole different weird thing the way they work, because I've
yeah.
put a lot of thought into them for books for trying to set up a
Oh, don't
fictional
forget
military.
when those commissions were created, the words didn't mean what they meant then.
Yeah, or it was funny. I talked to some or some. I was in the army, and I knew some people. They said that they were on like a Navy base or stationed with a lot of
Yeah,
Navy people, and so
yeah.
anytime they wanted the Navy to do anything, they would get their company commander, who's a captain, to call them and say, "This is Captain so and so," and they'd think of a colonel rank, a full-board colonel.
No, because the naval captain outranks in actual. I've studied this. A naval captain actually outranks an army colonel.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's probably
by one
depends on the
rank. Yeah,
military.
he's a no naval captain is E13, and a colonel is only E12.
Oh, I think yeah, you must be thinking of a different military because in ours
No,
it's
no, no.
O.
I'm talking about
Oh,
NATO
NATO.
command ranks, which
Oh,
the
okay.
US and because the US don't you because you got different. Okay, when you're in the US Army, you use your US Army rank, but but each US Army rank also has a NATO equivalent. But because the
Yeah.
NATO equivalents aren't all the same language, what they created was a system of officer rankings.
Uh, isn't that the E and the O though? The enlisted in O, and so like an O,
Yeah,
they
no,
should
no,
both
you
be
got
an
the
O
enlisted.
6.
Okay, you got the EO rank, right, which is the enlisted officer ranking,
Yeah.
and that is a universal NATO chart. All members of NATO assign an EO number to their officers, and I believe the naval captains have an EO ranking of 13, whereas an army colonel is only 12.
Maybe you might be thinking of a lieutenant colonel, but again, yeah, you get into all kinds of stuff because a brigadier general is not in charge of a brigade. A major general ranks less than a lieutenant general, even though a lieutenant is higher ranking than a major. So you start to just get into weird. Again, you're
And
throwing in
again,
those
I
old traditions.
having done security training, I know they do this on purpose so that if it's logical, a spy could easily infiltrate the army. If you
It makes
didn't
sense,
learn,
yeah.
okay, it's exposed security flaws. It's
Ah,
like
yeah.
it's like if you see a white hat saluting a black if you see a white hat saluting a soft hat, you know he's an infiltrator because high officers do not salute insubordinates. Even if he
Yeah.
has higher rankings on his shoulder, he's still insubordinate because he's a naval captain. He doesn't salute anybody first. And anybody else putting on a white hat it has to be in dress uniform. The only person who wears a white hat as part of their command is a naval captain or a deck or a fleet officer. So this
Yeah.
is all things created by madmen over time to actually spot infiltrators. It's like because your average infiltrator is not isn't going to undergo 20 years of training.
Yeah. Probably don't even fully understand the language, and you're asking them to understand all this other layer of stuff.
Yeah, but when your whole goal is to basically walk on base, grab something, and leave, you do the mission impossible, right? You train for that
Yeah.
specific scenario, and you
Man,
walk
I had
in with confidence, hoping that you don't have to do anything or any
yeah,
thinking.
just act like you're supposed to be there. Man, I had a roommate when I was in the army who was Puerto Rican, but he made an
Yeah,
awful lot of jokes about really being Cuban. It
yeah.
made me wonder, like,
A lot of Cubans did flee the revolution to Puerto Rico. That's
oh yeah,
because Puerto Rico used to have a very small population,
yeah.
and then suddenly it swelled.
There's a lot of Puerto Ricans, at least was in the army too. There's a lot of people who aren't even American citizens in the army. It's wild,
Uh,
but I guess that goes back
I
to like
remember,
Rome again.
I remember laughing when they were talking about all this Russian collusion. It says, you got 100,000 Russians in the army.
Nah, it wouldn't surprise me. There's a lot of Russians in actually in Israel that have wanted to get out.
Oh yeah,
When it was
well, half
bad, and
half of Israel is Russian. Yeah, half of
yeah,
Israel's Russian.
because they claim
Uh,
maybe they are, or maybe they just claim to have the heritage, and they get the ticket over there, and it's really just to get away from
no,
the
it's DNA now.
communists.
No,
Oh, they
it's
do the
DNA
DNA
now.
now.
You got to have a DNA relationship to at least one known member of the original founding Zionists.
Well, I'm sure that most of them don't really care. They just wanted to get away from Russia, you know.
But I think, given that some people always, it's in a country with the worship of, in a country that's God is gold, you can absolutely guarantee that a lot of people going in are not. Oh well, this is supposed to be about an interview, but it's
Yeah.
been a great
Hey,
interview.
let me
But
take a quick break because I gotta get some water. I'm about to die here. So let
yeah,
me.
take a quick break, and we'll finish with you a quick spiel about your book.
Okay. All right. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Now, while you're doing that, I might actually bring up. Yeah. No, because when you want to be a writer, I mean, most of my audience I come across are either writers or want to be writers. So, if you want to be a writer, you read your browser history is going to be weird. But these idiots going on about decolonizing healthcare, absolutely freaking idiots. All right, forbidden offerings. A young woman enters the paternal. It's like just a thing, but Well, that's interesting. Hopefully. All right. Sorry about that. Hopefully, got audio back. Had a, all right. That is weird. Okay. So I had a brief disconnect there. Hopefully, everything's all right. I think everything's all right. All right. Yeah, so, Forbidden Offerings is a study in human depravity. You can actually, yeah, your microphone's still muted. I don't know why. You probably have to refresh and come back in. I'll try and unmute you. No, won't let me unmute you. Because it won't let me unmute you. The joys of live streaming. People get buried. You think they would have the technology to fix the technology to actually just do this so easily? Here we go. He's got to restore his camera. Now let's see.
There we go. Is that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
It glitched.
Having issues.
I've had issues with streaming too. I don't know why some people could stream forever, day in, day out, not have any issues. I get issues every couple of streams.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess I
Yeah.
must be a few unlucky idiots. Get all the bugs.
hmm.
Yeah, as I was saying, with Forbidden Offerings, you really got to read it twice. You miss all the subtle changes. I
Yeah.
struggle to remember the names of the characters. I apologize. Uh, Victor. I mean, he's just basically led by his pleasures.
Yeah. So he. Man, and I always fall into hedonistic characters.
Yeah, same thing. I ended up with,
Yeah.
but it's a character exploration, right? You could. I know it upsets people, but these things are reality. I mean, you got to deal with reality. You can't deal with, thing. You can't basically go. What's that thing where you? you're living in utopia, basically. Is I'm trying to think what it is. Hope and expectations. I think you can't live in the expectations of what you want. You have to live in what you get.
Yes, that's very true.
And people, I think the problem is that there's a part of human nature that what we write now is there's always going to be contrarians. There's always going to be somebody who says the earth is flat. There's always going to be and sometimes they do it for the joy of pissing people off, right? I'm pretty
Yes.
sure there's a lot of women who became feminists, but not because they believed in the movement, but because they wanted to stick it to daddy because he didn't pay attention to me.
Well, and
And
that's
and they
one of
can't
the
deal with the
that's the
they can't
butcher.
yeah.
Hmm? Yeah, they don't.
Um
It's a mindless rebellion.
yeah. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that what Satanism is? It's just mindless rebellion. Like, I'm bored. Let's go. Let's sacrifice a goat. And then, I don't like her. Stab. Oh, that felt good. Stab. Hey, this is actually easy to do. Stab, stab, stab. I and people get like it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. And somebody stood up and says, "No, this is madness." And all the mad people says, "Shut up! No, we're good." And that's the problem. Is that I don't take your word for it. Whatever you say you are, I do not believe. You know, I believe in the rational, not the irrational. The irrational, when somebody comes and says I'm a real estate mogul, my rational mind says no. You have to demonstrate your. You have to demonstrate it. Do you have the certificates? Do you have the business? This is why
Yeah.
people fall for con artists because they're irrational, right? They believe what they're
Yes.
told. They believe, yeah, you know.
That's a whole rabbit hole. Is all the or the all the we just talked about
No,
commies,
I'm
all the
just talking about for
con
your
artists.
book from the
Yeah.
perspective of the book, okay?
Yeah.
And that the Satanists start off as a group of con artists who are looking for a good time.
Yes.
And
And
they
then
con
actually
themselves
find it.
into, they basically con themselves into being the world, to ending the world because it gave them a bonus stabbing somebody. And that's what I mean. This is why you got to read it twice.
That's I think a lot of books
I'm
don't
just
quit.
saying, this particular
Yeah.
one, with the Orion Crystal, I got from the straight away. It was very straightforward. It was very, very well written.
No,
And
thank
what's
you.
the other one with the cybernetic, the
That that would be,
detective?
that would be the Electric Archipelago.
That's it. The Electric Archipelago. Yes. He reminds me of an anime character in a noir anime. You know, he's smoking a cigarette and he's looking at his cybernetic arm, wondering which, and he trying to remember the event where he left, how he lost it. You know, can't even remember how he lost his arm because he's lost that many bits. You know, he's got to check. Wait a
He's
minute, is my dick cybernetic? Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, I had to check because I wasn't sure.
that's how deep he is into it. And I want to kind of do a spiritual successor to it, where I focus a lot on the body modification, and I have it would be a setting where it's in the future, but there's no aliens because it's like Dune. There's no aliens, but you don't need it because that's how different the different civilizations are, the different uh,
They could.
physical and
Here's the
mental
thing about
upgrades.
Dune, and a lot of people don't get. They didn't build these worlds, okay? They knew Dune was terraformed. They knew somebody had been there before them. They just didn't know how or when, you know. And here's the irony and the twist that I think when you go through Dune is that the story folds in on itself. So the aliens could be past from the Great Expansion, the
Yeah,
original Great Expansion. You know that there were no aliens. That the aliens they're chasing these forerunners who built all these planets were actually the first. You know first terraformers who went out from Earth.
Yeah, it's again that's so far in the future. It's difficult because I don't even think they know where Earth is and all. And so yeah,
Oh, there's a few who know. There's a few who know and have actually been there. But for the
hmm.
rest, because it's such a sacred place, because it's just a graveyard, right?
Oh yeah. See, again, that was
It's a grave. It's a yeah,
I was like I was a kid when I read I was in high school when I read all the Dune
yeah,
books. I haven't read them since. They're pretty
yeah.
good
But
though.
Dune is a case of the author dying before he could complete his work.
Yeah, and well, and like I know that him and the son and was it one of
The
the Star
editor,
Wars authors?
yeah,
Yeah, they
he actually he was editing Herbert's last book when Herbert died,
oh, okay. And I know it's
and his
supposed to be
son,
based on his notes. Do it?
yeah, his son first. His son didn't know what to do with it at first, so he published the original backstories for everybody.
Hmm.
He didn't know what to do with it because all he had was these notes, and they were expecting something. Herbert had wrote most of the backstories for all his characters. Some of them were quite elaborate, including the AI. I don't think,
Hmm.
but basically, the the point of the feud dates back to a handful of men had this mission, okay, to hold the line. The AI was coming. The AI had found them because they thought they were safe. The space was so vast.
Yeah.
So the Baron's family decided the best course of action was to continue retreating, and they left. But the Caledons held the line and won against the AI using the atomics, right?
Yeah.
So the Baron, to reduce basically the swore a blood oath line that they're just him and he well, he married the families, he made peace, and he put the other but he put the leader of the opposition to the Caledons into the position of the emperor. Um, he had orchestrated all these centuries revenge to destroy the Caledonians, who had basically um, they were proper in the Landsrat because they were the fair-minded, the logical. They always took the most reasonable approach to everything,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, they were heroes of the revolution, so you couldn't just up and kill them, right? Most of the Landsrat were all heroes of the revolution, but the Baron had disgraced himself. But irony was never expelled for desertion because the opposition, who later became the emperor, stood up for him, right? Because
So
that was a
yeah.
previous policy was that the AI showed up, you ran because you couldn't defeat him, right? All you could do, you could destroy their nodes, right? But you couldn't destroy their fleet. Their fleet was too powerful. But these new atomics basically jammed the communications, and their ships lay inert and were able to be destroyed.
Yeah, we did it again. We went off on a tangent.
We went off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
but
I was gonna say, I wanted it to kind of be a Forbidden Offerings to sort of be like a study of the different kinds of evil, I guess, because you have the different people
yeah,
who approach it in different ways, the different ideologues.
yeah, the people who enjoy it, or the people who are just indifferent, or the people who want revenge, or the people who are bored. Okay, that's the banality of evil. Is that uh, I think I think you covered it very well. I just can't. It's like there's about six different characters there, and
It,
just can't bring them. You know, I had to
I think,
remind myself.
yeah, I think the where the reviewer, the guy that reviewed it on Amazon, said it would describe it just like an onslaught, and that's kind of what I went for. I just went for like, I'm going to go for broke, just make it as brutal and just go as hard as possible, and that's why it's part of why it's a novella and not a novel, because I just don't know if you could sustain that kind of
No,
rapid fire stuff. So I can understand, yeah, getting overwhelmed by it. The other
yeah,
part of it was, man, I had trouble completing a novel for a while, just getting something long enough. Everything would stall out, and I'm like,
yeah,
I just
absolutely,
write so briskly a lot of the time.
yeah. It's definitely a departure from your style in Archipelago, but again, that's a departure from your style in the
Orion
Chris.
Crucible.
No, Orion. Yeah,
Blood of the
in
Vanguards
Orion.
is the first one actually I wrote, which was originally titled Joyful Carnage, but I changed that title. That one I
Yeah,
wrote, and then I went back. I unpublished it because I didn't like it. I ended up being like, I think it might be kind of cringy. It was my first thing. I'm kind of worried about
yeah,
it. I was finding, again, like you, a bunch of errors and spelling and stuff. But then years
yeah.
later, I redid it, and
Yeah.
that one, yeah,
The
that
thing
one
is,
again is a lot of that one changes genres like 20 different times. It was like a very experimental.
yeah, I've
Definitely a
sort
mistake to
of,
do that as the first one. What?
I, yeah, I sort of understand because I went through that with. I originally published it as Crisis, and I had all three together,
Mm,
and it was just on the size. It was just under the size limit. I had kept editing it down. I cut a lot of stuff out because people were saying, "No, that people won't believe that." A machine that can bring back the dead and stuff like that.
yeah,
But you got to understand, 10,000 years of technological change, and then for about 1,000 years, nothing new is invented because they're bored. Okay,
it stagnates and everything. Yeah.
yeah, and
So
then
that's, yeah. I kind of touch on that too, where I have a stagnant in Forbidden Offerings, where the Lovecraftian civilization is kind of stagnated, and I wanted it to be, yeah, like where they're kind of fighting over the ruins of something that was once great, and they've become very alien. They become so cybernetic, very,
yeah,
again, Giger.
very Giga.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
wanted
thinking, but
I wanted Satanic versus Giger. That was like
yeah,
the initial idea, and it just went from there.
yeah, because basically, I wouldn't describe it as pure evil. What I would say is what you've done is pour a little bit into each.
Yeah, and there's good. Again, that reviewer said, well, there's good there, but it's very sparse. And arguably, the nun is not good because she is having sex with a priest and things and leaving the order. So there are some people that are dogmatic that would say even she is wrong. So it's just
Yeah.
there's a little bit of perspective there.
But if you actually go with original doctrine, the whole point of a nun was to actually be there for the priest to basically knock up. To see,
Really.
it's oh yeah. Don't get me started on the original Catholic Church because today's Catholic Church is nothing like it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's completely different. Well, and again, there's even when you start to dig into that, it's like people really, really don't like the old school ones for the burnings and things. But if you look, they're
But
the
that
ones
was,
that preserved all that knowledge of the Greeks and
but
everything.
remember, they weren't purging people for being good. Okay, they didn't. They went through elaborate trials. They weren't. History's been oversimplified. Okay,
Oh, definitely.
Joan of Arc couldn't. If Joan of Arc was able to sit down with the priest instead of running away, but see, this is the problem when they actually went. The priests went 100 years later. They went back through the story of Joan of Arc. Her relatives and all her descendants and her followers were basically petitioning the church day in day out. Just read her letters, okay? But because she couldn't articulate at her trial what had happened to her, she there's no denying that her horse, armor, and sword appeared from nowhere. They could not find where they came from or where they went. But people swore blind that she picked up a sword and hacked down British knights, and she was only a child. Okay,
Hmm.
she had led the French, and the betrayal of the French was that no, they didn't want this child to become their king or queen, and it's like, you know,
Well, it gets into politics, and like I know
yeah,
one of her companions later on was convicted of some really, really insane pedophile murder stuff, and it's like, did he really do that, or did they just make that up because they wanted to get rid of him? I've heard with the Salem trials,
the
a lot of
Salem
that was
trials, the
land
same thing.
grabs. Yeah, where it was they wanted property, so they accused people.
Yeah, they accused people of witchcraft so they could take the widow's property. Yeah, and that's the problem. You see, whenever you give anybody power, but I'm saying the original trials were meant to be were actually quite lengthy, and here's the thing: if you wrote it in a short story, this is how they did it. History was made as a short story, and this is the thing. If imagine turning the Forbidden into a much more detailed story, and I think you'd lose the impact.
Yes, it needs to be short. It needs to be like a punk rock song, short and
Yeah,
sweet. Hits you, boom,
hit
boom,
you
boom,
in
boom, boom.
hit you in
Yeah,
2 minutes or less. Yeah, two minutes
exactly.
14. Yeah, I
That's
I
about
read
the
somewhere.
standard. Yeah, it's about 2 minutes, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it needs to be quick, and that's why it works it as a novella.
yeah,
It's,
and I forget the guy's name, and he went from zero to millionaire to billionaire to bust, but while he was a millionaire making a lot of money, actually wrote Hitmaker, and he said, "This is the beat, this is the time, every song that I've done, that it's exactly 2 minutes 14, everything." And again, I'm thinking, if you look at the more successful Harry Potter books, they're always shorter. If you look at the more successful, you look at the any attempts to mimic Tolkien have all failed. I think there's an audience split now, whereas once upon a time, the fantasy audience, you could serve up any slop. Um, uh, there was a short run recently of centaur fantasies that have died out. But I'm just saying, if you made your book longer, I think it would have been compared to Stephen King. It's not his
yeah.
real name. I forget, but he ain't no king. You know what I mean? He's
Is
not the
that
king.
is that a pseudonym? I did not know that.
I think it's actually. I'm not sure if he legally. I'm not sure. I just heard somebody said the other day. Oh, is that his real name or his pseudonym? And I'm
We
not
have
sure either now.
I'm looking
But
it up because we have all the information in the world at our
it's our
fingertips.
fingertips, and that's what we should
It,
do.
Wikipedia says it's Stephen Edwin King, and I'm not seeing a. Yeah, he was
Yeah, but
born to Donald Edward King, so it is his real name.
yeah,
Which I mean,
this
it's
is
a
yeah.
fortunate name to have if you want to be an author, because again, he got the moniker the King of Horror.
But the thing is, I reckon the true king of horror is R.L. Stein.
Oh, you think so? Yeah,
Yeah,
King. Well, King. Again, you get into politics stuff with him. He's pretty bad about it. But I think,
but the
love him
thing
or hate
is,
him for his politics or his work, he is proficient. He did a lot of stuff.
yeah, he's prolific.
Yeah,
That's the
he was
difference. Yeah,
always writing.
yeah. Now the thing is, I didn't like him long before because there was some because as for every good King book, there's a dozen that you won't that you'll put
Yeah,
down.
he's quantity over quality.
Yes, and
He's got
see,
some
I
good
could
stuff, but yeah, a lot of it's bad. What?
technically, if I think I would be far more prolific if I wasn't bogged down with my language issues.
Yeah.
I do remember when we were going through editing, and you said, "Are you addicted to the word and?" That was
Yeah,
you, wasn't it?
I
Uh,
don't know, actually. I don't think it was.
oh,
I'm not
because
sure.
I had
I've noticed, yeah,
because
issues there. And well, and
yeah, I
if it
really
wasn't
did.
for modern spell check programs, I wouldn't be able to write. If in the automatic thing, if it wasn't for that, and if I didn't have Google, if I wasn't like, oh, how do you spell this, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't, because you'd have to thumb through the. I actually have the thesaurus my parents bought me right here when I
Mm.
first started trying to write back in the day. It
Yeah.
was just too difficult, This is just terrible at spelling.
Irony. My education in writing at university was a course on writing um, uh, computer manuals.
That's what I was thinking. Sometimes reading like this guy, sometimes it does feel like a technical manual. And I
Yeah,
wonder if that bled
I
in.
yeah, sorry. When I did a writing course, unfortunately, it was a technical writing. It was
Mm,
so it was a technical writing slash writing for business, writing for.
yeah,
Unfortunately, when you do a writing course, you got to come. They don't just give you. They don't. You have to do all the prerequisites first.
yeah.
Everything in university is prerequisites, prerequisites, prerequisites.
Yeah,
The thing
I
is,
know that, yeah, because I'm a historian. I
as a
had to go through
kid,
so much other stuff.
I never did. I never did essays. I would always give a presentation. I could do it like that. I could get up there and tell a story like that.
Yeah.
You know what's irony? I wrote a story about. I wrote a story about a dystopic future where guy comes out of the valley. Post nuclear war. He's on an isolated farm and he's trying to cross the desert. And then
Hmm.
2 years later, Mad Max comes out, and I was like, oh,
Oh my gosh, that's wild. That
yeah.
maybe you should try a text to or speech to text. Maybe that might help. Just dictate to
I
it.
tried that, but it's so
It's
like,
so garbled.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid I would just be
I,
pacing around going,
yeah. Here's the problem: I let you don't pick up that I leave words out,
yeah,
that I'm not grammatically correct. But who is when they talk? Most people aren't.
yeah.
You'd be surprised. Text to speech. I'm listening to Fox, and you're looking at text to speech, and instead of saying micro, it you can imagine if they can't get text to speech right. You're listening to it. They said micro, and the text to speech is saying macro. You can imagine if text to speech
Hmm.
is making those errors. What it
Yeah.
would look with mine. Plus, not picking up on my accent, which people
That's the
say
other
is
thing.
fake, but
I
I
don't think
know
it's that
my accent's
strong,
quite thick.
really. It's not that strong. I mean, it's noticeable. I'm like, okay, he's Australian, but it's not that bad. My
Yeah,
Texas accent's probably much worse.
yeah. Because you sound like every other Texan I've met. Sorry.
And I never
You sound
lost it
like
even when I was in the military. Do what?
you sound like Frank Hill.
Hank Hill?
Hank Hill, sorry, yeah. Yeah.
Damn it, Bomber. Hank Hill,
Yeah.
and being in Texas, like, man, that character, he is definitely, like, I've seen that guy so many times, that sort of pained, socially awkward guy who's just trying to kind of live, and he's sort of it's not, I don't wouldn't call him conservative, but he's just kind of he doesn't want to rock the boat or whatever, and he's just kind of
Yeah.
always got this pained expression of like awkward. I don't know how to describe it, but that Mike Judge perfectly picked up on that person. I used to work with
Yeah.
that guy. He used to run the shop that I helped run.
Well, how we doing for time?
Man, we're at 2 hours. We might have broken the record.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Oh, for
you
how
if you
long? I can stay for a
yeah.
while longer. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're currently working on. Because
So
me personally, I'm hoping that you do follow up on some of your previous stories. Because Orion Crucible, I actually like the idea that you get a guy addicted to war. He starts off as a rookie, makes a lot of mistakes, but once he gets out there in the pilot seat, he actually finds he's got a knack for killing.
yeah. So man, as far as Orion Crucible goes, I have been thinking a lot recently about redoing it and going through with the original plan. So the original plan, I couldn't follow through with it because I did start working on it, and I started working on some of the original plan was you've got this novel where they're in the academy, and it's the four principal characters, and then they go on to each do something. One of them's a starship commander, so you've got that side of it. You've got the giant fleet battles and things. You've got a pilot, so you've got the X-wing TIE fighter type stuff, the wing commander type stuff. You've got an
Yeah.
infantryman, starts off as like
Yeah.
a platoon leader, goes on to be a general, and then you got a
Mm-hmm.
spy, you got a secret agent, and so you can get
Yeah.
all these different angles. You can introduce all these other characters, and so what there would be is each of them would have their own series where it would be
Mm.
stuff pursuant to a cold war against these two other factions, and they're helping their allies and stuff, and then eventually over the course of these books things get worn down to where okay the actual big war starts, and those would be series, and it would be its whole universe. And the my sort of thesis statement for it is by the time that when the war kicked off, and if somebody walked into the room and said the third fleet just got annihilated, the reader would know exactly what that meant. That it
Yeah.
would chill them because they would know everything about this universe. They would know everything about everything. Like, and the example would be in Star Wars. Talking about the X. Well, I'm sure you played X-wing when you had those LucasArts games. There's a whole campaign in X-wing, like 12 missions of just weakening and destroying a star destroyer, like they would destroy a battleship during World War II. And it feels so good to finally destroy that star destroyer. But then you realize later there's a million of them. I don't want to, so it's pointless. I don't want to do that. I want a universe. Wanted to create one where if a battleship or a dreadnought got blown up, you would feel the impact because you kind of know how many's
Yeah.
left, and there would be no ass pools, there would be no secret super weapons, there would be no Deus Ex Machina, there would be it would be all
Yeah.
earned. They would win the war ultimately just because they were smarter and fought better, and it would be those lessons you would learn at the academy with the hollow table, those would be
Yeah.
applied, and they would
Yeah.
be strategy to it. So that I want
Yeah.
to do
Going.
that, but I don't have the
Mm.
money or the time. I started
Yeah. Yeah.
I started
That's.
making some of the ovens, and some of the beta readers didn't care for it, and I was like, it's not working, it's not clicking, and
Yeah.
I'd have to get expensive covers made, and then the Biden economy happened.
Yeah.
So I like to do that. Right now, I'm working on a dark fantasy. I want to shop that around. I'll actually probably send it to you and have you look at it. Again, you're the fantasy guy. You
Yeah.
might be more into that than you are the horror. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I didn't. I didn't find. Well, you shocked me. I when because you've been telling me you're working on something for a while, and you've been working, and you said,
I've
"Oh,
been
I'll
working on a
publish
bunch of
it."
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of threw me for a curve when you threw Forbidden at
Oh.
me because I was expecting something different. I was
Oh yeah.
expecting that you're still working because you hadn't told me you changed genre, so I was expecting it was either Archipelago or Orion.
Oh yeah.
But Orion's a kind of epic project that I think
It
you
is.
start and finish with, whereas the others. Oh geez, I've got writer's block. I'll get rid of these ideas now.
See, I feel
I'm
like
not saying you. I'm not saying you
yeah.
didn't do good work. I'm saying,
Oh
geez,
yeah.
Burn Offerings is good. I liked Electric Archipelago. I like the fact that he spends more time drinking and smoking than being a detective. That's like pure noir right there.
Yeah. I liked the descriptions a lot. That was like the most fun I probably had writing anything, and I kind
Yeah,
of want to return to that. I've got an idea for how I could do it, but it would be I don't know where I would put it because it would be more like a series. It would feel more like a
yeah,
TV series. It would be this very long thing where we'd actually go through it with him becoming. I wouldn't call it a skinwalker this time. I'd call it like a chameleon, probably, or changeling. And I
yeah.
would have it to where we're going through. I kind of refined it a little bit, but again, I just don't know where I would put it, and I think it would freak too many people out. Some of the ideas I've got, where you'd
Yeah.
have like biomechanical people, just have every kind of crazy thing you could conceive, because that's what people would do if they could do that. So
Oh
there's,
yeah,
I've got that's again a long term project right now. I'm on trying to focus on a dark fantasy that I'm going to shop around to. I
yeah,
can't really say much about because I'm going to shop it around
yeah,
to agents because I think it could have a chance to be published. If it's not, then it'll go up on Amazon. I've got one right now. Again, we're talking about the prisoner. I've got an idea for a detective. There's not really a genre name for this, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Where there's sort of the surreal, not detective, secret agent stories. There's things like The Prisoner. If you've ever read Burroughs, where he has these sort of vaguely secret agent characters, they're on vague secret agent missions.
Yeah, political
Fear and
thrillers.
Loathing. Do
Yeah.
what? Fear and
I
Loathing
think
in Las
political
Vegas kind of
thrillers.
goes into it.
Yeah.
What?
Hmm.
Where he's not
I,
a detective. He's not a secret agent, but he kind of speaks like he
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I've got an idea for something like that that would have a really shocking beginning. I think could hook people, but I'd have to
Yeah.
get it working. And then I've also got a horror anthology because I have again just had trouble making anything that's novel sized, and so I had a lot of stuff where I'm like, this is gonna be a novella. I can't publish just a novella. So I'm like, I'll group all these together and do it as an anthology,
Yeah.
and that would be a little bit of everything. A little bit of slasher, a little bit of Lovecraft, Satan, all kinds of stuff, some sci-fi.
Yeah. So I think I really freaked some people out with the Naga with the ogre ripping the guts out of the Naga. Um, but I mean, you're an undead horror. You know, and I also think that this is that's the thing. Cade knows he's an undead horror, but he's pragmatic. You set this undead horror against the pirates.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh, and
basically good.
also your stuff has so much political intrigue and these strategic discussions about economies and things and world
Yeah,
and building
but that's how
civilizations. So
conspiracies
then,
work. Yeah, that's how
I mean,
conspiracies work. Yeah, I'm giving
yeah,
you
but
the yeah.
what I'm saying is that then all of a sudden it goes to something like that, and it's like, whoa, it's kind of a whiplash there,
Yeah,
maybe.
it is. It is. It is. But that's exactly how it works.
Yeah,
You see. Um, we have a restless being who's seen countless lives and is now sitting in the chair, most powerful chair in the known universe, and he's basically no longer wants to be the destroyer. He wants to be the builder. And
yeah.
I suppose this conversation is something that you know is good to work out because I think if you were going to advise a new writer, you would say, speak to another writer because
I
one of
would
the things you've got
say,
to give up is
yeah,
is the fact you've got to give up this fantasy that every writer makes $1 million. I mean, I don't know where
yeah.
this idea came from.
Because it kind of used to be like that, where it was much easier to get stuff published and make a
Well,
living off
I
of it.
remember when J.K. Rowling published, there was less than 1 million books in publication in circulation.
Yeah.
When who got recently this new recent book outsold J.K. Rowling, and yet 3/4 of the planet hasn't even heard of them. This is how big,
Hmm.
you know, because J.K. Rowling, most of her money and most of it isn't book sales; it's movies.
Yeah, the
But she's
movies at least as big as the books, if not bigger.
well, the movies made the books, not the
Yeah.
other way around.
Oh, you think so? I thought I heard of the books before the movies, but I don't know. Maybe that was just
No,
them talking
that was
about the
just the book.
movies.
No, for 4 years you heard about the book, but the movie was in production. Once the first
Ah.
movie had come out, the other books started coming out. But each book came out a year before the movie. But no, those other books didn't exist until the first movie was made. That's
Yeah. And that's the other thing is you got to compete with TV, video games,
you
movies,
got
all
it
this
more,
stuff.
yeah. And you think, as successful as Harry Potter the movies are, Warner Brothers lost money on Harry Potter
Really?
the movies. Yeah,
Hmm.
they made. That's why. Look, the fact is, video games are 14 times bigger as an 14 times bigger. Warner Entertainment made a huge mistake, right? They had comics, movies, video games. They decided to focus on the Harry Potter movies, which meant their video game um, most of the profit was coming from video games, and they decided to focus on the Harry Potter movies. And of course, the comics went by the wayside as well.
Well, and that makes me think that
Again, it was the activist, because the activists wanted to turn Harry Potter into a vehicle.
well, and they have a lot less control now because I was gonna say,
Yeah,
if you look at, I've got on my laptop here, I've got 3 games: Dusk, Slay the
yeah,
Spire, and Balatro. What do those all have in common? They're all independent.
independent.
And
Yeah, I've heard of Dusk
Balatro was
and
one
Balatro.
guy. Yeah, Balatro was one guy in his bedroom
Well,
making
yeah,
that for fun. So
and one guy embarrassed. Well, Capcom learnt their mistake with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6. Is there Resident Evil 5? I don't think so.
I
I
don't
think
even know at this point. I've
but I
lost
think they
track.
learnt their lesson from Balatro. Um, there's Balatro, Hollow Knight. Um, well, let's see. I'm
There's a
playing
lot.
Postal. Yeah, I'm playing
Postal
Postal,
was
and
a
it's probably
small
one of the most
studio.
popular. Yeah, Running with Scissors is a small studio, but Postal 2 is one of the most popular indie games still, despite its
Yeah.
age. And Doom's no longer an indie game, but it used to be for a long time.
Oh yeah, Ed. Yeah, Ed was again a couple of guys in a
Four
studio
guys.
in Dallas or whatever.
Yeah, four
Yeah.
guys in Texas, but they broke up.
Yeah, they
Romero
broke up.
left long ago, yeah.
And
But
so
they
yeah.
created Ion Storm, which created some good games.
Oh,
But
they
then they
all
broke
did.
up.
Yeah, they all branched out, and the only one that kind of messed up was Romero with
He keeps he makes a good game, then he makes a bad game. But each bad game wipes out his good games. And
yeah, people just
I
want to
forget
be
the name.
negative.
And yeah, unfortunately, his last good game was what every last good game is overshadowed by his bad
Yeah.
games, and he stopped making games and started producing, and he's been a successful producer ever since.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and Carmack got out of it altogether and I think is doing VR
No,
stuff.
Carmack's living on Doom money. Yeah, he's living
Yeah,
on Doom money, having sold Doom to an studio to Bethesda.
yeah. But I mean, that just shows again how things are evolving, and you don't need maybe a giant group to make stuff. Maybe you could just put something on ModDB and put a Patreon link with it, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
And maybe that's
Oh,
a hope for us, is we could just put things up on like Amazon, KDP, and you just got to get some success. I know people have done it, but it's usually with something super controversial.
well, I didn't set out to be super controversial. I didn't set
Yeah,
out to make. I just basically said, I looked up. I heard. Well, see, when I was creating a story, I heard about a medical condition, and where guys are born. But all babies start with all babies start as a conglomerate, right?
yeah,
You don't have a gender, you don't have anything, right? But there's a condition that occurs when you have a faulty X chromosome, and you can actually be born a girl.
yeah,
I never heard of intersectional and intersect IS before, so I actually studied it. Japanese have a very good comic book actually called IS, but unfortunately, IS is now associated with Infinite Stratos. But originally,
hmm,
IS meant intersex, and there was a Japanese comic about it, and it was actually exploring what happens to people who aren't born with normal sexual expression.
yeah.
And I got to thinking, looking at the description of elves, it sort of fits that mold. What if
They've
that's
always been
why?
androgynous. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what happens. You become this androgynous person. So could elves be androgynous humans? And Cain and others were born girls, and then they express as teens. But of course, out of that, there'd be a majority women. The majority would be women. The majority would become girls, but there would be the intersex of their gender, which would be the Futanari, which you could be boy, girl, or both. That's exactly where it comes from the
see, and
Japanese. Yeah, so
it's all a good thing to talk about, and it's all
but these are
interesting.
genetic. Everything I
Yeah,
have done has happen genetically to humans. There have been humans born with floppy ears or big noses or
Yeah.
a male with a vagina with the urethra or the clit or whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
growing out. That's
But
these are all things.
it gets so
But
mixed up with crazy politics where the people that actually do have these issues kind of get
and the
thrown under the
people with
bus,
these issues don't have politics around these issues. It's the outsiders who have the
Yeah.
issues.
They're
It's
victims again. They're
Yeah,
being
they're
used as human
creating a victim
shields.
class. Yeah,
That's the
but the
thing
thing
is,
is,
yeah, is you're not really trying to get with this stuff. You just
yeah,
happen to be exploring these
I,
ideas at a bad time.
and so people think I'm woke, and so
Yeah,
they expect Cade to be gay, or that his gay father turns out to be, he's actually male and female, so he's has sex with men and women because he's male and female.
yeah,
He's genetically he might have a penis, but Cade's mother and father are the same person. No, this is the weirdo. But then you say, but a trio of witches gave birth to Cade. No, Cade was transferred to them. Okay, this is the weirdness of
yeah.
storytelling, folks. You can actually have,
That's
yeah.
yeah. That's one of the problems. One of the reasons why I hesitate to continue the cyberpunk stuff is because I've got some weird, crazy, wild ideas, and I think it would
But the
just be
thing is,
yeah,
both magic and cyber technology allow us to have stuff that I cannot repeat on air, but you can actually do things totally that you could turn any crime into a non-crime. Where does crime begin and end when you have magic or technology that's sufficient?
yeah. It's like the whole thing. Yeah, yeah. I get what you're saying.
So what you have is an empire that's struggling with, well, any crime has to be treated seriously, and and you basically have to just protect things by zone. Just basically you're going to have to accept the fact that there are only a few mind readers, so you have to protect the core of society and just hope for the best with the rest. That's why you have genetic engineers and baby breeding programs, because the rest of society just keeps falling apart. There's no economy. You can replicate everything. Factories work simply to give something to people, something to do. Otherwise, they'd just replicate everything.
I think the
There,
feral historian, the YouTuber, the feral historian, was talking about that about the Star Trek economy, where it doesn't
the
really make
Star Trek
sense.
economy doesn't exist. Doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
and just make people make work. They're gonna have to do that.
Yeah. Then they get to the point where you go, wait a minute. Yeah, everybody gets replicator rations, and what do they do? Well, people get bored and go to a cafe and hang out because they could just ask for another and another. But the thing is, somebody has to repair all this technology, so they need to generate money somehow. They need to generate work somehow and educate. So they actually Star Trek. It may be space communism, but so could mine. So I
Yeah.
have
Well,
I
and when
have
you get
basic.
yeah.
Kate is living Xi Jinping's wet dream.
Oh yeah, definitely. Hell
But
yeah. Well,
but
and it's like when you get all that tech, yeah. What are you gonna do? Because you can't have people just sitting around because idle hands are the
yeah.
devil's hands or whatever.
Well,
Uh,
that's what he's doing. He's putting people to work. He's basically going, look, Dad, look, grandfather, your economy didn't work. Okay, it's falling apart. You're in the middle of a fuel crisis, and you've been sitting on all these resources. I'm going to put them to use. And his grandfather, basically having poorly dealt with his son and his falling out with his boyfriend slash girlfriend, because two likes attract. He's
yeah.
and of course you have the aristocracy whose basically pastime is incest. So you have all those things, taboos, and where do you draw the line, and then you basically have Cade, who's basically born with a voice in his head, and it's not like everybody else's voice. this is you know this is a this is I wouldn't say I would say an agent of chaos. That devils, demons, whatever, they're not exactly religious or political figures here. These are real beings with real motives and existence. They envy life. They possess people because they want to experience what it's like to be because you have feelings, you have thoughts that they can't experience, right? They're immaterial.
Yes.
They can't experience the material world. And every time they try to experience the material world, they get sucked back into their own. So they have to possess somebody to anchor. And having failed with Takahiro, he basically turned around and saw a new life and said, I'm going to hide out here for a while, and I'm going to get my revenge on you by kicking you out of office, man. I'm going to use your grandson against you. But unfortunately, Amadeus falls in love with Cade. Basically, they become best friends. And so it's, so he actually experience. So he's not actually controlled. They communicate with each other.
Yeah, I never really interpreted that as control. I interpreted it as he's not a parasite.
No, but when
it's
people think of
symbiote.
when people think of possession, they think control. No, it's a power. It's not a power domain. He definitely has the devil on his shoulder. But Asmodeus doesn't always play the devil. He has amazing powers, but he rarely uses them. He can enthrall people, but he rarely uses it.
It's more of an intelligence thing than anything for him, where it enhances that, and he becomes the. It is very interesting. It is a great twist that he goes from the whimsical boy genius, like almost like a character from an early Toriyama manga or something, and then becomes. You find out, that's because he's got a demon.
Yeah, and basically, I sort of explore and see this is the problem. I didn't go into the bright neon part because he hasn't actually explored the outer realms yet. Because of his demon, he glows. Right, the more is this part in I think book 3 where people are in the shadow realms and they're glowing and they see the glows of others. And what I didn't say, maybe should have said, is that their bright glow that they were homing in on was Cade.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have the part where the dragons are swimming and you're gobbling them. And well, when you're the most, see, it's all. See, I do want to give it all at once. Sort of. You get that because basically I was going to say burnt offerings, but forbidden offerings. You basically got that in a much shorter version.
It's something like it does definitely deal with the other dimensional things, and there is the idea of not that they have to possess, but that they have to undergo something. They have to something has to be done in order to
hell
cross
can't.
over.
The whole point of these, I think it's a spoiler, but the whole point of these sacrifices, no, actually it's in the description. The whole point of these sacrifices is they can't live on this earth unless these conditions are met. And the only way to create these emotional conditions is to turn humans into emotional wrecks. It's the only way they can possess them. It's the only way they can control them. It's the only way they can exist on this realm. They can't do it. They can't exist as full-fledged beings on their own. They need a host.
They need to. There's a lot of skin imagery in there.
But I'm just saying they can't experience the things they want to experience because they don't have skin. They don't have flesh. They don't have a mortal realm.
Flesh for our world, yeah.
Whereas in their realm, but in their realm they've experienced everything and they're bored.
It's a failed universe, which that goes again back to a lot of esoteric ideas, and it goes back to Lovecraft, where actually the most powerful one, the creator of the universe, is called the blind idiot god, Azathoth.
Yeah, yeah. But remember, Love for as popular and as powerful as Lovecraft is posthumously in real
Yeah,
life, he was mediocre and despised by his fellow writers, and
he was
often
he
hated
was
by publishers.
he
And
was
Innsmouth,
more he was more well known for editing a amateur author magazine. So it'd be, I believe, in his time. So it'd be like
wasn't he?
nowadays if somebody's running a forum. Do what?
Yeah, Innsmouth was only published because he agreed to do work for the editor.
Yeah, he didn't really publish a lot. He a few things here and there. Mostly again, yeah, known
Yeah, but he
for.
worked for but to get published, he had to go to work for the editor and
Oh
do
yeah,
edit other people's work.
yeah. I know he
That's
did some ghost stuff too. I think he
yeah.
did a ghost novel for who or work for Houdini or something.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I read
I
the
just
Joshi
remember.
book,
Yeah, I
but that
just
was a while
remember there
ago.
was a love. I had a book from a Lovecraft expert who basically broke down it all and yeah said that.
I'm looking at it right now. I can see it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's St. Joshi or Jahashi or something like that. It's a Lovecraft H.P.
mm,
Lovecraft a life probably is what it was.
yeah. There's a few.
Oh, there's a
I
few.
think yeah. There's a whole thing. If don't get into Love Bros though, you just that, that's another dark side.
Well, and people get so distracted by his cat name. This is his cat's
uh,
name, and it's like, okay, it is funny, but there's a if you want to again be scandalized by him and his race stuff, there's a lot worse stuff than that. I don't even think he named the cat. I think he like adopted it or something, and that was already its name. But yeah, again, it's the whole thing with him.
I think Lovecraft, however, was of the opinion that um, life was a comedic mistake, and
No, you
that
think
the
so?
elder gods, yeah, that were amusement for the elder gods, and
And
yeah,
just like
any contact.
yeah, it's useless. That yeah, you can't
Well,
oppose
that's
them.
yeah. Well, any contact with them drives us insane. But
Yeah,
and if you look at Innsmouth, I think a lot of people think somehow it's the perfect English summer, but it's in Massachusetts, okay. But
yeah.
although there was a time that the perfect English summer was a trip, a hop across the pond, so to speak, to Massachusetts. So there is
Yeah.
that. But I think Lovecraft again. Um, I think Lovecraft would have loved your book. I think it would have appealed to him on multiple levels because I actually heard somewhere he used to laugh at horror. He used to think it's absurd, which is, I guess,
That's
fits with his idea of the absurd comedy
there's a
or dark
really, really
dark humor.
there's a really disturbing. I think it's what it considered one of the more disturbing movies. It's a CGI movie. It's called Where the Dead Go to Die, and they were interviewing the creator, and he said he made it because he thought it was funny.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah, there's something there.
yeah, well, did you read any Lovecraft or
I
any other horror before
I think
writing this one? Or
I've read it when a while ago, the Lovecraft stuff, and
yeah,
like not that long ago, I listened to some audio stuff of it.
mm.
To
So they're all short
mainly,
stories. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I mean they're all short stories,
Yeah, they're all
and
pretty short.
they all fit well with audiobook format.
I would say I looked at art more than anything for inspiration.
Yeah, you brought
Art
up
and
Giga.
music.
Wait,
I've
wait, I
listened
was
to a
going to
lot of
say,
dark ambient.
yeah, you brought up Giga before, and I was going to say, yeah, that's a name that's come into popular culture now. Um, what's the one? Electric Archipelago.
Yeah, that I had some references to Giger's because some of
Yeah,
the people adopted biomechanical bodies. that it briefly
Yeah,
mentioned just in the background.
yeah. Because that was something Giga was into. Body horror, body
Yeah,
dysmorphia.
I think he see the way I approached it kind of was like he was seeing into another universe what he dreamed, and that was he was
Mm.
seeing into this other universe we're dealing with, and seeing these horrors. I
Well,
think the game Scorn kind of touches on that too.
Ted is actually popular. I can't think of his name. He actually said that he wasn't writing fiction. He was writing his observations of another universe.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and then also if you want to get into other places with that, Tesla would insist that he didn't come up with the stuff; it was given to him from somewhere else. So there's definitely
Yeah,
like something going on there. We're touching some other plane, I kind of
yeah,
I don't know if I fully believe this, but it's something I'm like maybe.
mm, yeah. Because I started writing again because I was dealing with stress
Yeah,
in 2012, but I'd written lots before that. But like I said, I had my computer when I went to go to Vietnam. I had all my computer and all that stuff taken. I had lots of art, lots of stuff. Um, Stuff you can't replace these days. Because
yeah.
uh, Louis Royales. What these postcards go for now. I had them back when they weren't pop culture, when genuine fans bought them, for $10. You can't buy them
Yeah.
for less than 100 now.
Mm, yeah, it's a real
But
setback.
it is. Same with anime figures. Where you gonna get original 2RU chibi figures now, and you have to commission them, you know, or find secondhand. You know how rare secondhand people who buy anime figures don't tend to sell them.
Yeah, like, that is true. You keep them on a wall somewhere or on top of your computer. I guess that's old school. I'm thinking old school computer monitor. But yeah, you tend to be collectors of a lot of things. Don't sell them.
No. And a lot of the original figures didn't come in boxes. You bought them off the shelf.
That was
There
back
was
before anime. Yeah, was
Yeah,
big.
before anime was big. Same with the books. I remember going to the stores and they'd be, you better not be wanking in the Japanese section. They didn't even call it manga. No, they called it the Japanese section.
I only seen it like once in like the store called Incredible Universe, where they had
Yeah.
a manga section. I was kind of blown away by that. But yeah, now
But
I
the
go to the bookstore with
original,
my
but
buddy, and they got a whole section. Hmm?
yeah, but once upon a time it was, remember the old bookshelves, the stacked ones like this, where you slide the books in that have all the different, and they'd have
Yeah,
and you'd have the Sailor Moon, you'd have the Astro Boy, you'd have all the DVDs, not DVDs, CDs, the Japanese
yeah.
CDs, and they'd have the little translation books. That's how old I am.
Oh my gosh. I just
Before this,
I yeah, I just know it from Toonami back in the day. That's where I got
yeah,
into it.
I just remember that what suddenly one day they put Astro Boy on TV and it took off because see,
Really?
I lived on the north side of Sydney. It was just, and my mother used to go to the city some weekends, so we'd just be hop, step, and jump to the center of the city, and these days, a woman taking a 9-year-old boy into an anime shop would be unheard of. But back then,
Yeah.
because they were very rare back then,
Yeah, you'd only get to find something like that in a big city.
and you'd only find it in a niche bookstore. And they didn't say, "Hey, you're a kid, get out of here." They would say, "Oh, customer."
Yeah.
What? Because like back then, they'd say, "What's a customer?" My cousin. Because back then stores I couldn't believe it when I did accounting, when I was looking at some of the old books for the company, that some of the companies I was working for, the rents they used to pay $100 a week, make 500 a week.
Oh my
And now
gosh.
they're making 500 a day, but their rent's 1,000 a week, and their insurance is 2,000 a week. It's like
Yep.
they're barely making any money, and
That
yet their turnover is huge.
that's the thing is I make way more than I ever thought I would, but still don't feel like I make anything hardly. I make enough to survive and maybe a little comfort. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Well, that's the thing. I've got a little comfort. I've got about a dozen figures. I've got my laptop, which is now nearly 5 years old, maybe older. Um, I still got my original laptop, but it's dead. It could turn on.
Yeah.
But that's about it. Can't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just
Get everything
but I
off
couldn't
it
be.
and destroy the hard
Yeah,
drive and throw it.
yeah. But I remember like anime figures have come a long way. The vinyl's better. The coloring is real consistent. They're really good. But you know, it's the same with writing. Writing reached its peak technology ages ago. Digital books aren't really a thing that people are really mad for. Audiobooks, people were mad for them for a while, but look how expensive they cost.
I just go on
And
YouTube.
yeah, and like I had an audiobook, and because it was done by AI, they're now banning it, and it's like,
Really?
really, Apple, really, Apple, because
They're
it's
they.
Google AI. Yeah,
Oh yeah, because it's the other side. But if you use their AI to do it,
if you use their AI, they'll publish it, but it costs money, and that's why they're doing it. It's not about morals or people's jobs or voice actors. No,
yeah.
it's all about money. But I really didn't get anywhere near the value out of audiobooks for the money that's put in
Yeah,
for it.
I used them a lot because I used to drive a lot because I had a 2 hour
Yeah,
drive home from work. And
yeah,
so yeah, like I'm gotta listen to something or I'm gonna go insane. So I found a YouTube channel. What is it? Is this gonna crash it if I go on YouTube?
yeah,
I mean, I listened to the Blood Meridian audiobook, and that had a
yeah,
big effect on me. Like, as I was going to answer the question of what was the book that inspired me, there really no individual book inspired me.
yeah,
It would be more just I needed to create stuff, and I tried everything else. I didn't really have, again, the connections to go be a director or anything, to have the money. Tried getting into
yeah,
art, can't really draw very well. Tried doing CGI stuff, can't. It's too complex. You need to start out with a very simple program and work your way up. The only thing else I ever did was like some video game stuff for like Snap Map for the Doom or like Far Cry Arcade, made levels in that. But writing, it
yeah,
just is the only thing I could do, and I just happen to be good at it. Uh,
yeah. Well,
that
see, I could write programs, but not sophisticated ones on my own because games I'd be
yeah,
bogged down with my inability to do art anyway. I
that's the
actually tried my
thing.
hand at video game making, and at the indie level, the amount of backstabbing and lying and dealing with bugs. I don't know how half these games get published, but some of the garbage I've seen on Steam goes, yeah, but before Steam, there were shareware networks, and they're full of. I mean, $5,000 seems a lot when you're young, but $5,000 is nothing. Most of
Yeah,
these people who
it's
publish games, most of them, again, it's like writing. You might as well write. I mean, sure,
yeah.
I'd love a video game, but how do you put Kate into a video game?
You
It'd
could
be
come up with
hentai.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it'd be a
You could
hentai
do a
story game. Yeah,
one of those where it's just all like still art and yeah, there's a lot of dialogue. That
yeah.
could work actually.
That's what I was thinking of doing originally, but I couldn't get an artist consistently and often enough, and
That's
plus
the
the
thing.
cost. You're looking at 150 a panel,
Yeah, and
not
I
per
like
page.
supporting artists, but man, it gets expensive. The
Yeah,
best
and the
you
artist is making a living and you're not. But even then, the artist is like, yeah, but I'm doing. It's like I've spoken with artists and they're saying, yeah, I'm doing 4 jobs. So yeah,
And a lot of them get really, really bogged down in making porn that they don't necessarily like, because that's just where the
well,
money comes
actually,
in.
what's weird? I forget her name, but she started as she's a Magna Car, and she did start in hentai, and it's the industry. You've got to take the job to get in. This is how they sort the men from the mice. Basically, if you cannot sit down and draw somebody up, if you cannot sit down and draw the art as prescribed and as told, then you're of no use to the industry because you never know what you're going to be asked to draw. And if you can't
Yeah.
draw a tit, a boob, a hand, and the hentai is the most demanding. It's the most demanding audience in the world. If you're even off slightly, you are dead to them. It is
Hmm.
manga is the most competitive world industry there is right now in entertainment.
Yeah, I've seen stuff on it. It's pretty wild.
Remember, Strike Witches, a little nothing manga, turned into a huge $1 billion franchise for a short period of time. Pokemon, a $70 billion franchise.
Damn.
Harry Potter is way down the list, man. It is way down there. It is way down the list.
That's
There
because
are
Japan
franchises,
does what
but
they want.
yeah. But see, the thing is, Western franchises outside the West are not big.
Yeah. Well, there it's Japan. It just such a unique culture. They can do unique things. They just think a little bit different, just enough to where they come up
Yes.
with it. Like I don't really see anybody anywhere else coming up with something like Death Note, which is just such a crazy
Yes.
idea.
But it's their culture. Their culture produced those ideas. They're just
Yeah.
packaging it. But again, it's unique to the Japan where a Japanese movie about a death god outsells Harry Potter in Japan by 10 to 1. It's the only country in the world where Harry Potter flopped on its first release. Yeah.
They're trying to remake it. It's like you don't got no original ideas. Those old
No,
movies
they
weren't
don't
good
know.
enough.
It's the problem. I asked somebody the other day, right? What's the point? And basically, well, we were discussing liberalism and how liberal arts always degenerates back to repeating the same stories for generations.
World War II myth. Yeah.
Yeah, like the World War II myth, the cowboy myth, you go further back. But see, a lot of MCU is nothing but retelling of the Herculean myths. Or remember, the S for Superman is not hope, it's for socialism, folks. Superman was created as a socialist icon in Nazi Germany, by the way. S for
Really.
socialism, yeah. 2 Jews were given the task by Harry Truman to create wartime propaganda, so they came up with Superman.
No, because
The
the Nazi Superman that
yeah,
distracts from it, that counters
yeah.
that idea. Yeah.
But then later they backdated it to 1932, but you can't find the originals somehow.
Hmm.
You can find the 1942 publication.
That's another thing. They're making a new movie of it. It's like, I mean, I know people like the character and all, but like, do you really need another movie of that?
Well, here's the problem. Without okay, those who make movies can't make video games, so they make movies. It's like people who
Really?
write can't make movies. Look, think about George Lucas. If he had not met Spielberg, do you think he would have got into Berkeley or UCLA,
Probably
and be
not. There's definitely a good old boy thing with that, where
yeah, yeah,
they're all together. Yeah, he knows Spielberg and all them, and was it De Laurentiis? I was just watching something earlier about it where they were talking about how he was showing them and they gave him all the tips to edit it and get the original Star Wars to a state where it was watchable.
Well, the thing is, everybody laughed and walked out except for Francis Ford Coppola, who turned around and says, "You got something, kid. You just got to trim it down." I know the stuff that people said that to me, But if you took out the descriptions if you take out the world, sure, you could turn my story into a human story, cut it down, take out all the world building, and you have a nice, neat little story that people would like. But then it wouldn't be unique. It would just be it would be everybody else's work. So I guess that's the same with Sacrifice. If you cleaned it up for a modern audience, it wouldn't work. It'd just be just another Stephen King novel.
It would just be another Lovecraftian transdimensional horror novel. It wouldn't be uniquely brutal, and that's what I'm kind of hoping people pick up on. That's what I was like, let's make it as just hard as possible, as crazy as possible, as harsh as possible, and see if that sticks. See if I get something going.
Because here's the thing, and a lot of writers don't know this. You don't know what's going to sell. I remember when cowboy novels. Yep. I remember when I walking into manga shops where there was less than a dozen manga, and there were 100 comics. That Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Spider-Man, Iron Man, had them all. I had Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, I had Archie's coming out of my rear end. You go to a shop nowadays, newsagents, they don't even have comic books anymore. Look at the death of the comic book. They went from selling millions down to selling thousands.
Yeah, well, that part of that's because they got really heavily infiltrated again and started doing weird.
But it's not just the weird; it's the cost. When I was a kid, 20 cents was big money.
Yep.
Buying a comic book was big money. I had a choice between comic books and toy soldiers. Sometimes it wouldn't be. Sometimes it would be a toy car or a Lego. You didn't have many options as a kid. Manga was a luxury that you could only read in the store because they were imported, so they were dollars to Western comics, which were like 20 cents for a Donald Duck or 50 cents for a Spider-Man.
Now you can read you like a volume of Berserk for like $2 a piece or whatever on Kindle.
Yeah. Well,
the thing is, things change and people don't keep up with it. Like you were saying with the movies versus video games, where it's now more about the video game than the movie.
Well, same with the movies. Most of the movie profit is actually the merch, or is mostly for the merch.
Well, that goes back again to Star Wars, where he was kept the merch rights as like a concession.
He saw Kenner's ad for toys, and he created while he was working on what's it called? American Graffiti.
Yeah, that was the one before, yeah.
Yeah, and he was working on that, and he saw the ad, and he started working on the toys before he worked on the... So he created the toys, then named the characters. It was originally Luke Starkiller.
Yeah. See, my understanding was the opposite, that he had made it because he liked the old sci-fi serials, and it was a tribute to that, and he started getting this, and it became kind of a disaster, and then he, as a concession, instead of taking money for direct to get all, he said, "I'll just give me the merch rights," because it would worth
No, that was the breakup he had. No, that was the breakup he had with Fox. George Lucas is a storyteller and a serial liar. He had a breakup with Fox. Remember, there was a time that he was going around telling everybody that Jedi were all these noble stand-up charity workers. Really, I haven't seen that in any Star Wars movie.
They definitely. That's the thing about the prequels, where it went really wrong, is they wanted to sort of subtly, I think, say maybe they're not quite what Obi-Wan was making them out to be, and then that just went to that just presented it so clumsily.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you'd like to do when you're not writing, but I know what you do when you're not writing. You're working.
Working a lot, yeah, I work a lot. I play. I think the relaxing and not writing thing is the same, where it's just I'll play a video game to try to take my mind off things, try to unwind, listen to something,
Yeah,
listen to some podcast about cryptids or something, some silly stuff, just to unwind, you know.
yeah.
But yeah, I try to utilize all my extra time just trying to
I'm
get
pretty
stuff out
sure,
there.
like I'm pretty sure, like all writers, your search history would get you into trouble with the FBI.
I would definitely I search for some of the weirdest stuff. I've got a whole bookmark section of just titled research, just a whole tab of book or a
Same.
folder of
I got
bookmarks.
research, and yeah, um,
But
I discounted a lot of legends when I was putting together the Empire because if you basically, could you imagine how big it would be if I went right? I've amalgamated, even if I amalgamated three folklores. Could you imagine how big it would be?
yeah, your lore book, your Bible, series Bible is gonna be more stuff than the
Then
actual material.
yeah, your world building would be like, hi, yeah, Order of the Phoenix. No, that's just chapter. Is that Order of the Phoenix? No, that's just chapter one of the law book for Celts. Yeah.
That's
So
the
I
thing.
cut a lot
Yeah.
of stuff. So I get people complaining I cut of stuff out. Yeah, like I could I could do the Genchi route and keep introducing characters, or I could see. I'm sort of inspired by Bleach, where you can basically have these different groups, and they all represent a different aspect of Cade. Like each,
Yeah.
but ultimately, I I've decided to take the artist route with writing. Um, that's fine. You still want to be a professional writer? Go ahead. I mean, it happens. I mean, I'm not telling you that it won't happen. I mean, you got a good. I actually believe you got a better shot at it than me.
It's
But I'm
a
just
long
saying to
shot,
the
no matter.
audience, for the audience, you know, um, what advice would you give a new writer? I mean, it's fine. I know what you think of that. I know you're a little bit. I know you a little bit. I wouldn't say I know you well. I just say know you well enough to basically think that you have a good shot at making it.
Oh well, thanks. I would say do it, just do it. It's like the Shia LaBeouf meme, just do it. But at the same time, I would tell people start out small, start out reasonable. Don't try to make don't do what me and you both did, where we make the giant epic novels first thing. That's not what you need to be doing. You
Yeah,
need to start out with short stories and novellas and microfiction. Go on Twitter; they have Sci-Fi Saturday stuff like that, where it's writing prompts and you're just
yeah,
writing like a tweet that's like a little
yeah,
story. And but you say at the same time, you do need to be motivated to do it. If it feels like a chore, it's not working. And
yeah,
the way I did it is I found something, that original story, Blood of the Vanguards, where it just clicked into place and it was no longer awkward to write. It no longer felt weird and cringy. And you just got to do that. Find something you're passionate enough about that you don't not thinking about it. You're not being self conscious, and at the same time, it's something reasonable for a beginner, and you can work your way up to your dream story. That's the high fantasy trilogy where every one of them's 100K.
yeah. Well, look, Martin started out as a Hollywood scriptwriter.
Yeah,
Uh, Asimov started as a editor on a science fiction magazine. Actually, we took the Asimov route. He wrote, although sorta, he was just prolific and true. He basically said, I think it was on Letterman. Letterman asked him about his stories, and I wrote about 700, I think, mostly about myself. I wrote about 700 novels, but don't
that's that.
forget, he was writing. He, see, the thing is, he was writing at an age where a young man living on his own, getting what, working a few hours a week as an editor, getting $20 an hour back when people were getting $1.50,
Yeah.
he was king, getting $20 an hour as an editor. You can imagine that these days you
Oh
wouldn't
my
survive.
gosh. Yeah,
But I'm
that's
just saying, he was getting, bloody top dollar because he was as a professor, and
that's back
he
when
was
again you didn't have tools to edit. You had to do it by knowledge and everything and by observation.
yeah. So um, he had the advantage. I think maybe tools have made us weak as a society. I don't know, where you no longer have the genius who stands out. Where two guys with AI could create a video game because they don't need to do the art. They could just ask the computer to do it for them.
See, but that don't. I feel like that has to balance out somewhere, and there has to be compensation, and maybe like with my book, if you notice with the Forbidden Offerings, I put no AI in there, uh,
Yeah.
just to make sure people knew, and maybe that'll be where people it'll be seen as better, superior if it's no AI. People will seek that out, like they seek out handmade stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I was reluctant to re-edit my book but as somebody pointed out, well, you've got to add this warning label to it, so you might as well. So
I
I,
don't
I
know. I'm
think
gonna have to
sooner or
pull out
later.
it. Do what? Sooner or
See,
later,
the
what?
problem is the editing tools have gotten better because I wrote it back in 2012. It's been sitting there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I actually did. I tried the old editor on it and it said no errors. And then I tried the new editor on it and said, oh my God, are you dyslexic? Is English your first language?
I didn't think it was that bad. And
No,
again, I
okay,
thought a lot of it was the editor he used mangled it, is what I thought.
the first time, yeah, because I've used the word and for some reason they conjoined a lot of sentences to keep the consistency. So they actually added. Um, I did because when I did the new edit, I used the original, not the. I actually loaded version 1 and just ran the editor on it. So there'd be a lot of repeat edits that I did, but I had an average of 15 errors per chapter, which ain't too bad, but I'm talking errors, not spelling errors or commas out of
Yeah.
place. I mean things like that and which and be and to missing, all the and too many conjunctions, but. So I had to break a lot of sentences. So when I re-edited, I actually didn't I didn't edit the version that the editor gave me. I edited my original version. So, but yeah, the editor I think that's the mistake when an editor gives you a version back that pretty much keeps you consistency on the. Does hardly any editing because they didn't touch any of your dialogue,
Yeah.
and the and it's weird, but I think I'm happy. I wasn't disappointed with errors of people, and a lot of people pointed out they didn't care. It's only a handful of people were cared that it was less than perfect English. I didn't
That's
have to
what
edit
I
it
get.
as it's just my 12th time of not wanting to edit and then forced to edit
Yeah.
because and this time I'm just going to say, look, I'm grammar Nazis. I just wanted a monkey off my back, with putting in the warning label because, yeah, if I do get somebody trapping and saying, "Wait, this sounds like sexual assault," you didn't give a warning. You're a toxic male. You don't understand women. What happens with Amazon. They get
Yeah.
a bee in their bonnet. They want. I think what they're trying to do is get rid of a lot of people off Amazon. I think Amazon is getting tired, and I
Yeah,
think
they've had a lot of messed up stuff. A lot of people put on some wild stuff on the KDP.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they're kind of like.
Well, they got rid of See, the thing is, when I started in 2012, there was a thing called Write On. Do you remember Write On?
Very vaguely.
It was like WhatsApp, but you could basically take what you put and click the publish to KDP.
Oh, really?
And then they decided to make KDP for everybody. And so Write On became a sort of a proving ground for your novel, and then getting it approved and published. Anybody could publish. So they took Write On down.
See, I've seen. There's a book up on KDP that's self-published called "Fucked to Death." So I don't hardly see how they can ban your stuff. There's so
It's
much
not
worse things.
banning per se. It's just, oh, you've. I mean, for Christ's sake, there's a book about a guy having sex with a horse on Amazon. For Christ's sake, but
I believe it. There's
just
there's a
because they
whole.
call it a satyr, yeah. Just because
Oh
they
yeah.
a woman having sex with a satyr, it's a horse for Christ's sake. Okay, yes, I
Well,
have. Yes, Kate has a thing for satyrs and satyrs, or whatever you want to pronounce it. But um, yeah, he is
if
a
you
satyr as himself. Yeah,
if
but
you look up like YouTube videos of the most disturbing books, Iceberg, there's so
yeah.
many things that are just like insane. Like, how the hell is that even or how is it legal and it's up on Amazon?
Well, yeah, but I think Lolita got away with it because there's no physical activity,
I think
and
some of the other ones
Stephen King
have
got away.
physical activity.
Yeah, but Stephen King has physical activity. That's
Yeah,
the thing. I've seen so many books. Remember, there was a book called 17.
I'm not familiar with it, but
It was like like a retelling of Lolita, except instead of younger, she was 17 years old, just
yeah.
which is legal in some states but not others, and that was taken down.
Oh, really?
But other books weren't. There's actually one called. There's actually a true life story about somebody who had a rather disturbing relationship through life who was taken down. Yet Flowers in the Attic is still up. So there is some rather inconsistencies there.
Certainly.
And again, I think it also comes down to the gender of the author
Oh, definitely. Like if they're gay, because I know
or the
there's some.
politics.
Yeah, if you're on the right side of the politics.
But again, I'm not deciding other people's morals for them. Cade has relationships which are in some states illegal, others not.
Yeah. Well, and it's also
And
like you're the it's a character. You're not the character. You don't necessarily
yes,
uh, uh, condone what the character does, even if they're the protagonist. They might be a flawed protagonist, so yeah, they might do
yeah,
stuff.
he's a flawed
If you look at
protagonist.
like
Yes,
yeah, if you look at
yes,
like the thing that comes to mind is the movie Escape from New York, where Snake Plissken walks past a woman being raped and doesn't intervene, but I'm pretty sure John Carpenter would intervene if he was walking past a rape.
Kurt Russell. Yes,
Yeah. So it's like,
yes, but the thing about Snake Plissken, and I think you get that implied thing that yeah, he's an undercover agent. If he intervened, he would have everybody would have killed him.
yeah, he's gonna get compromised. That's fair, but I mean, just the point of it that
It
the
didn't have
author's
to
not
be
their
there, but
character.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't think
I think
about
it's
that, but yeah,
I think that's a prime example and a good example of the fact that Carpenter, knew how to deal with uncomfortable subjects in a way. But then again, these people train for years and they go through, they have a big book of what you can and can't do.
yeah.
And John Carpenter tried, actually, didn't he go into video games?
He did
I
do some
forget.
video game stuff.
Yeah,
He was involved with the Fear games.
yeah. I think isn't it funny how you can be more financially successful and less famous at video games, but more
Yeah,
famous as a director and not turn a dime? But
I
I
would say
don't
he's
know
pretty
how that
influential
works.
though.
How can the thing be so widely viewed and not $1 billion movie yet? And again, this is what they call scale. I don't know how that works, but you and I would definitely fall into that trap where you could be, like Asimov. I got 700 novels published. Yeah, but how many turned a dime?
Yeah.
Again, you made your money as an editor of a science fiction magazine, not as an author. Um, that's fair enough. Okay, I I mean, I got no personal beef with J.K. Rowling. I just I just find it highly questionable how she made her money, considering other people can't even make a tenth of that.
Well, and there's that mythology behind it that she was a very poor single mother and was like writing this on her free
That's
time. And I've
mythology.
I've heard that it's not actually true. She's actually pretty well
Yes,
off, and
yes, yeah. She said she never got a dime from her ex-husband and could prove it, but she never has.
I've heard the theory that it's actually an amalgamate. It's like a bunch of different people that wrote it, but then I've heard people say no, because there's like flaws in it and in certain
Yeah,
tropes where it
but
repeats.
yeah,
So I don't know about
but the,
that.
yeah, but remember they gave Ruth $100 million for 50 Shades of Grey, and the movie's a financial bomb that lost 87 million. So
Really, I would never have thought that.
no, but see, the problem is, I actually thought the concept behind 50 Shades of Grey is why we have the. I think 50 Shades of Grey was made as a psyop, basically to get people running around saying, "Oh, I'm a goddess," and create the
Yeah, I've
whole
never watched it
mythology
or
of.
anything.
No, but I think it's just to create the mythology of the dumpy housewife who goes from letting a man do anal, which is somehow supposed to be uber super kinky sex, and somehow makes him a super master dom. But yeah, and anyway, from a guy who goes around from a to basically she becomes the dominant, at the end, that she's the one who gets the house, the man, she's the one who gets the mansion, the car, the child, and he's the subservient one serving her tea at a picnic.
Well, that's just a basic power fantasy. That sort of thing's been around
That's
forever.
exactly what I'm saying. That's 50 Shades of Grey was to create the modern feminist power fantasy, the ultimate gold digger.
I know it scandalized a lot of people.
But it really wasn't, because I read
Uh,
many, many much better books that
Oh yeah, there's so
basically,
many. You just wait till the Blood Meridian movie comes out. That's gonna, assuming they stick to the book and make it even a tenth as harsh and crazy as that thing was, it's
yeah.
gonna
Well,
be
but
horrify
they,
people.
but look at the stuff they've bastardized. So there's always that. But again, 50 Shades of Grey. You turn to a random page and you go, "How the hell did this get published?"
Again, probably knew somebody.
Yeah, well, she did. She turned out she was a writer at BBC who married the head
Oh
writer,
yeah.
and then she contacted her friend who was also named Ruth, who wrote the who just got a book deal for her own book, the Twilight, and got a deal for and got a deal for, and got her to put her book forward, and it got a
Maybe that's
deal.
why, because I think I've heard people say it's Twilight fan fiction or whatever.
Yes, it is.
But it's like, I mean,
But
if
she
if
also
people are
knew,
into it,
yeah.
hmm? I
But
mean, it's
they
not what you
knew
know;
each
it's what
other.
you know.
Yeah. Again, it's like, why does the industry give J.K. Rowling a billion in advertising to sniff her panties? Because she wrote a book about the wizarding world for children, which is a coming out story that could be used as as a psyop for coming out as gay out of the closet. You're a wizard. You're special. You
That's
know.
true. Yeah, that might be it. It might be for that ESG money. You can make it an allegory. Um,
Yeah.
I
But I
do. I want.
remember a lot of the influencers at the time who were pushing Harry Potter were all gay. I remember they saying it was all their coming out experiences were revolved around Harry Potter. I remember the whole scandal that with how, the lie she told about Disney offering her $1 billion. Disney, no such offer or meeting took place. They would have gladly
Hmm.
accepted her book. They if they she never approached them. Warner Brothers, there's the people who paid her $1 billion got fired. Those Walter Amada and all the people involved with Harry Potter have been fired since because they cost the company $2.8 billion. They did not make a profit in their entire time they were there.
Oh, and that leads into a larger thing of a lot of things I don't think really make profits, and I suspect they're subsidized by the government. And that's the only reason that they stay
Yeah,
afloat.
and that's what I'm thinking. I think this was one big, huge money laundering operation, which is why J.K. Rowling isn't a billionaire.
Well, it's
No.
getting late. I got to go to work
Yeah.
tomorrow. I just touched my laptop to wipe some dust off, and it burned my hand. So it is not liking running this program.
No, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely 3 hours, over 3 hours. Dang.
Yeah, well, give or take the errors, I would think.
Yeah, down
I would
for.
hope that
Hmm?
we've given writers some good advice, and maybe I've spoken a little too long about myself. Never, never. Who, me? My favourite subject's me? No, really? But really, I mean, I, I'm, I'm not honest. I don't blow smoke up people's ass. If I
Yeah.
think somebody's a better writer than me, I say so. Because I don't think I'm the greatest writer. I think J.K. Rowling is. I think there's smut writers better than J.K. Rowling.
I mean, those books were big and popular, and there's
And
that.
then
You
the
know,
kids
I
grew
read
up
them. I
and
thought they were good. I liked how they
I
became darker as they went on as he grew up. You know.
oh yeah, but you know, again, I prescribe to the theory that she had help, which is why she's not a billionaire.
Yeah, that might be again the key is you got to know the right person.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that she. I'm just saying, that there's a lot of stuff, and I think for any writer setting out, admit your faults, admit your mistakes. I mean, for every writer that succeeds, there's 10,000 of us who don't. I mean, and she has no time for those who don't. She's not a good person, folks. She's
And
just likes to laugh. And
I can't
that's the thing that
comprehend
gets me
that.
about her.
Yeah, if
No,
somebody
I'm
likes
just
my
saying from
stuff,
personal
yeah.
experience. I mean, see, I'm just saying she's portrayed her activist friends, and she, you know, okay, maybe she did grow up, but I don't think her politics are what she says they are. I think she's riding a wave right now simply because she had a falling out with her activist friends. But
And
you
she
look
never
at
made
her,
anything after it that was successful. I know she did like a serial killer book and things.
yeah, she said, "Oh, I'm such a great writer. Look at all the stuff that I published under other pen names." Really? Yeah. Were they a $1 billion franchise too? No. So they weren't as successful.
At least King did the do a pseudonym, do a pen name, and became successful into that too. The Richard
Yes.
Bachman.
But that is a different story. He made
Yeah,
money as Bachman, not as King. He
yeah, that's what
made
I
better
mean.
money as Bachman, but he
Oh,
made
he
better
did.
stories as Bachman.
I know he made a lot of the darker stuff.
Yeah, but he made better stories. You can't blame Stephen King for the disaster of Dark Tower. He told them not to change the story or the characters.
Oh, and the movie, I never watched it. I've
He
only read the
warned them.
first book.
He warned them the only audience you have for Dark Tower are Dark Tower fans.
Yeah, because it's such a big Weird West sort of amalgamation thing. And it's
Yeah,
really only for the hardcores because it loops into so much of his other stuff. It's
yeah,
like
and
the center of that universe.
yeah, it is actually. You're quite right. It's the center of the universe. So I think The Shining. I think definitely. It was just happy that it was made,
That was
but in
only
the
because
late,
Kubrick, and he did
yeah,
his own thing with it, you know.
but Kubrick allowed them to keep the central theme, but the rest was
Yeah,
taken out. But the thing is, um, the whole story was supposed to be a flashback of the boy's childhood, and how his mother was killed by his father, and his father was committed to asylum, which gave rise to this Cuckoo's Nest as a conspiracy theory as the sequel. That's not that. That was actually written before. It's King probably had read it, which is why he wanted Jack Nicholson. But
yeah,
as a writer, I think there are times Stephen King did make excellent ideas like that, but he was in the position to.
yeah,
I think I again, as my advice to writers, and I think this goes with you, is there's going to be works that aren't going to be famous now that are going to be famous later, and there's going to be works that were good
yeah.
once, and then people wake up and go, "Well, yeah, I was 11, so of course I liked Harry Potter, but I was 11."
Yeah, and different. Like, there's so much stuff now. Like, it's was the coolest thing in the world when it came out. It is cringe now.
Yeah, I remember the original Battlestar Galactica, and everybody knew about Battlestar Galactica. Hardly anybody. People used to be get beaten up for talking about Star Wars. You know, I actually subscribe to the conspiracy theory that a lot of movies don't get made simply because Fox wanted to keep the value of Star Wars.
Yeah, because nothing ever quite came about that matched it. You know, a few
Everything
people
gets cut
tried, but
short. People tried, and I think I do subscribe to the theory that George Lucas didn't write the original Star Wars; that it was Kasdan all along, and he was just a director.
hmm,
But Lucas definitely was a contributor. Otherwise, he wouldn't have, been the. Otherwise, Kasdan would have just come out and tore him apart.
yeah. Well, I know it again got edited. It changed a lot in the edit. That was saved in
But
the
so
edit
did
as
his
other things.
story. Over the years, Lucas has told different stories how it came to be.
Yeah. Well, and
And
if you if you look at the what's it called, the Golden Journey idea, that being a part of it, that was like propaganda later, where they made a whole special and they're like
that
talking,
was
have this
that
guy
was some
talking
guy's
about it.
there, and the guy admitted that it was a thesis on Star Wars. So how could Lucas and
Well, they always
yeah,
bring it back to that. Yeah, and it's like this is sort of making it like, okay, it's okay to
it's a
watch this.
retcon.
It's not just for little kids. It's based in mythology or whatever.
Yeah, but it's a retcon, and we all know it. But I look forward to reading you next, and I'll, of course, I won't
Definitely.
spoil it. Look forward to reading you next, and I do hope, yeah, if your dark fantasy takes off, I really hope so. I, of
You'll
course, I'll
definitely have
give
a
you my
credit in there
yeah,
either way as helping as a critique
yeah, but
partner.
yeah, but you know, I am. I'm glad you're not disappointed because a lot of people get disappointed when they, don't get picked up, and I think that's a mistake. because I'm not saying just because J.K. Rowling failed 28 times, she's not the only one. Tolkien,
That's nothing, you know. There
Asimov,
are people that
yeah,
query for
Asimov, yeah,
years. There are people that have been.
Asimov took a job so he could get published. So did
Yeah.
Lovecraft. He took a job with an editor to get published. A lot of authors these days, Tim, I'm a bestseller. Well, then why are you still on Fox? You know, I'm a top podcaster. Really, where are you now? No, you're not on top forever. You're not going to be at the bottom forever. I think the only consistency is change.
This is true.
So I'll let you have final words, and I'll shut this baby down.
Well, again, yeah, I guess final words. You gotta start. There's that old the joke of the guy every night, prays to God, let me win the lottery, let me win the lottery, and he keeps doing this and never wins, and he one night cries out, why won't you, God, why won't you let me win the lottery? And God says, you gotta buy a ticket. So you gotta work at it,
So it reminds me of the joke about the guy who's waiting for God to save him in flood. He says, God, why didn't you save me? He says, I said, a log floating past. That light in the distance was a helicopter. Yeah,
Yeah, you can't
got to
just sit
shout
there
out. Yeah, if you want to be saved, you got to shout. And I'm sure Paul was telling that story on the fishing boat. If I hadn't called out to Christ for help, Christ wouldn't have come and saved me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Take care, man. Thanks everybody for
Definitely.
coming. Don't forget. Definitely. Don't forget to the book. His book links are in the description below. So thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, support the channel. Yeah, like I said, book links in the description below. You can support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.